OTB AM.
With Gillette, proud supporters of Movember. Gentlemen, let's move.
And you're very welcome along this Tuesday morning to OTB AM. It's Ger Eoin and Owen Sheehan with you all the way through until 10. And we have a banger of a show. We've got Ronan O'Gara. Mickey Quinn is going to make the case for the underdogs this weekend, both Cavan and Meath. Cavan 7-point underdogs, Meath 10-point underdogs in the respective Ulster and Leinster football finals. We'll also talk football with Daniel Harris. That's coming up in a few minutes' time. Most of all, we'd love to hear from you this morning. 087 9 180 180, or of course you can leave a comment on the YouTube stream, youtube.com/offtheball. Owen Sheehan, good morning to you.
Morning, Ger. How are things?
I'm good. How's your mo coming along? You're rocking the goatee. That's cheating.
Yeah. No, I need to shave. I'll do it later. How's yours?
It's a bit spindly and miserable as I kind of expected it to be.
Spindly and miserable. It's a metaphor for life, really, isn't it?
Well, for November in particular. Except it turns out it's the greatest November of all time because there's literally too much sport on.
You could definitely paint that picture for sure. It depends what sort of camp you're in. Like, I mean, there has been enough depressing moments throughout November to really paint it as a terrible thing. That it's terrible that sport is happening altogether. Like, whether you support certain GAA teams, whether you support the Irish national football team. Thankfully, on the rugby front, things managed to turn around a little bit on Friday night. But other than that, it's been a terrible month. I've got no idea what you're talking about.
You wouldn't be counting your chickens, though, if you're the rugby team either, going to Twickenham to face an England team who are talking us up in advance of the game, despite the fact that they normally pummel us around at this time. I did want to... It's a Tuesday, Owen. What happens on Tuesdays?
It's Power Rankings Tuesdays, but I was off yesterday, so I wasn't going to spend my day off looking through whether or not Meath or Cavan should be in the top 10 of GAA. I don't have any better things to be doing, but I still decided not to do it. So we'll do it tomorrow. That's
okay. I mean, on a day off. Although I suspect that your adoring public will be like, hang on a second, you're not actually taking this as seriously as we do. And they take it seriously.
They certainly do. I know. I definitely take it more seriously than all of them. And that is why they don't know. That's why when they get in touch with their opinions, they're always wrong.
How are you leaning? Like, I know obviously there's an algorithm and it all makes sense somewhere along the way, and you know it's not just plucked from your arse pocket. But
the one thing about this year and this weekend is that we've seen this before. We've seen these fixtures before. Like, at least if it was a resurgent Kildare under Jack O'Connor who might be taking on the Dubs in a Leinster final, you might be saying to yourself, well, we haven't seen this fixture in a while. Or if it was a Monaghan team taking on Donegal, we might be like, well, they never got this crack at Donegal last year. But the problem is, we had these exact fixtures last year. We've seen Cavan try and take on Donegal and fall flat in their face, and we saw Meath trying to take on Dublin last year and fall flat in their face. The one thing is, if things are closer than we expect this weekend, then we're in for a real good finale, I would have thought, in the All-Ireland, unless, of course, it's Donegal who get run close and Dublin smash Meath by 25 points. There could be an opportunity here to show that actually what we saw in the summer of 2019, a lot of things have changed in the intervening 15 months or whatever it's been. So my enthusiasm for what's actually going to happen or what's likely to happen from here on out is not great, to be honest, because I think that Parky Queeve, maybe Fermanagh Down was a good fixture. Like these sort of in the melting pot games, I think are going to be few and far between. I think Cork and Tip obviously is one you can look at this weekend as a game that could throw up anything really. But the problem is the winner is more than likely going to get beat by Mayo.
Right, so you're shooing Mayo into the Ireland final at this stage.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Let's just play out a scenario where Cork perform at the same level that they performed at against Kerry and win with 4 points to spare. Right, it's a good performance, not a great performance, but it's silverware, important silverware for a new young team, a reward for the 3 years of hell that they've had, and they have a bit of wind in their sails, confidence. You could use the word momentum if you wanted, against a Mayo side who stuttered a little bit against the Galway team. You think Mayo are just going to batter them physically? They're further along their evolution, or what's the...
Yeah. Well, Galway are much better teams than Tipperary, and this is an important moment for Mayo as well, where they have this nice little thing to look at where it's like, maybe we're not actually the world beaters some people think we are. We now have this extra motivation that will be totally artificial within the camp, but it's important nonetheless that we have been shown to be a little bit mortal at times. On Sunday, we did not play fantastically well. on Sunday, and this will actually be a huge incentive to actually get things right for an All-Ireland semi-final. Like, there is a bit of a fear that Cork might have played their All-Ireland final already. The great thing for them, though, is that they've already had a week off. If it was a one-week turnaround, I think the opportunity of Tipperary beating Cork would have been greater. And I know I was saying it last week that I wouldn't be so confident in a Mayo versus Cork All-Ireland semi-final. I think as time progresses, the more you think to yourself, well, this is actually going to line up to be Mayo versus Cork for sure. Now, like, Tipperary obviously are a much stronger team than they would have been at the start of the year. If there was no pandemic, Tipperary probably, they might not even have made it to a Munster final. Chances are they would have, but decided to draw they were on. But they're definitely stronger with the players that they've got back as a result of the pandemic. And like, I think this is going to be a contest at the weekend. And because I'm not sure would Mayo allow Tipperary to be a contest. So put it that way, I think that Mayo are definitely a step ahead of Cork. But as we've seen, like, we don't actually know what's going to happen sometimes with this Cork team, that they are on the way up. And when the team is on the way up and have this ridiculous reservoir of confidence, they can sometimes do anything. The only team that I would really write off a game against Cork with at the moment is Dublin, and that goes for most counties. I do think Cork have that punch to knock out most of the big teams, except for Dublin. I just fear that they've already landed that blow, and I'm not sure they can do it twice. Like, there's just so much motivation now for Mayo to A, right the wrongs of some of their performance on Sunday, and B, to not let Cork get 2 upsets in a row. Psychologically, surely Mayo can't go into that Cork game in a bad place.
Okay, and from what we've seen and in the trends that we're seeing so far, are you concerned that it could be a double-digit victory for Dublin in an All-Ireland final if things continue in the direction they're going, or do you think Mayo can give them a game?
It was a double-digit win for them in the All-Ireland semi-final last year, so you definitely have that concern. Are Mayo a better team than they were last year? I think they probably are. I think that what they've shown this year is an ability to actually use winter conditions pretty well. Like, I mean, we haven't seen the peak of Mayo last weekend, that's for sure. But like in the dregs against Galway the first day out in the league, like that for me, that was a really impressive performance, because it was like, this is winter football. They showed up ready, and this is going to be something that probably suits Mayo quite a bit. They can play in a number of different ways. They're particularly good at running the ball when it's required, and they'll do okay in this winter. It's sometimes, if a game gets too open and there's a lot of kick passing and there's a lot of direct ball into the forward line, that's where Mayo can get opened up, and it happened to them on 2 occasions in last summer's championship. So I just don't see them getting hockeyed by anybody this year. I can't see them beating Dublin. I can't really see anybody beating Dublin at this point. Like the Donegal game, and this might actually be a point into where the teams are going to finish up in tomorrow's power rankings. I do think the Donegal game, assuming that happens,
is there All-Ireland final?
I think so. I think so.
Well, it was really interesting listening to Shane McGrath last night talking with Joe about Tony Kelly. He was making the point that every year that Ballyea get through to Munster Club Championships, Tony Kelly is unstoppable at this time of year. Like in horse racing parlance, he likes a bottomless ground. He glides across it when everybody else is getting caught in the muck and rubbish. Tony has this kind of, like, he's got snowshoes or something on, except he also can prance around like a ballerina at the same time, which is a very unique combination. Maybe some of these other teams also have athletes like that that we don't know, that are winter superstars. And that's your one hope, if you're not cheering for Dublin, that somehow they'll get caught. That there is a physical freak out there who has yet to make himself known, to reveal himself to the entire country as a winter superstar. Come the summertime, everybody, the advantage is gone. On fast ground, no good to you. But on a bottomless sod, perhaps there is a football's equivalent of Tony Kelly just waiting to kick 7/9 points /12 points against Dublin in an All-Ireland final.
Donegal are that team, I think.
Maybe.
If you're going to pick one that have like this collection of thoroughbreds who are going to really challenge Dublin on a soft sod, it's got to be Donegal. Like, it's Giants Causeway in the middle of the park for them. Everywhere you look, they've just got big men who can kick really important scores, and it is that really crappy point where you're watching a game, and it's usually February on a terribly wet afternoon, where these somehow certain players just have an ability to kick a beautiful point on a crap day. The move might be terrible. There might have been 4 dispossessions, 12 turnovers in the build-up, but somehow this player gets the ball in his hands and manages to pop the ball over from 45 yards. I think Donegal have a number of players like that who can just pop up with a big score, and a moment of grace in period of chaos. And I think the likes of Kieran Thompson, I think the likes of Michael Langan, I think the likes of Jamie Brennan are those sort of forwards who can play on a terrible, terrible day and just shoot the lights out at very random moments, or so it seems to the audience sitting at home. I think Mayo have similar players, but I think Donegal are just better equipped to go 70, 80 minutes in that sort of style, because that physicality is going to be essential at the end of the day. And in every single line, they've got big men. But then they also have the small men. They also have the likes of Ryan McHugh, who can dart around a player, those ballerina feet, as you put it. They're also going to be important. And then it comes down to your wild card, like your Aidan O'Shea's and your Michael Murphy's, and where are they going to be positioned on the day? Where is your Mark Keane, for example, going to show up if you're 2 points down in the last minute of the game? Do you have an ability to get a score out of nothing? Like, the one thing I still think it comes down to as well is that if a team can show up while scoring a lot of goals this year, they'll have a serious chance, because like, we just can't get a deluge where it will affect the volume of scores that are being put over the bar. But if you have a team who can put up 3, 4, 5 goals, then you're in with a serious shout. And that is the one little bit of hope that Mayo fans will have going into the weekend, because you got to have hope, even though it looks unbelievably unlikely.
Do we have one of those teams playing Dublin this week? Why, yes, we do. It's just what the doctor ordered. It is a team who has clearly been working on trying to score goals and is scoring goals, even though they say they haven't been. I'm not buying that. I think this is cute tourism of the Meath kind, where they're like, geez, we don't even play football. We don't even practice. What are you talking about? We throw the lads out onto the field, they wrestle for a few hours, and whoever's left, we pick them. That's how it goes. And I don't mean the pitch. I mean they're out farming, wrestling with cows, steers, bucking broncos. And then we whoever's left, the least bloodied one, he starts and eats the young of the others. That's how it works.
Like, that is the training regime that is going to be required, obviously. Like, the thing is, Meath, they're onto something here. I love the fact that they can go out and score 12 goals in 2 games. And no matter what happens this weekend, is this not the sort of thing that they should be sticking with for next year? Because if this gets executed well on one day, it is the one thing that can beat the Dubs. It is the last time the Dubs got beaten in Leinster. Like, it was a little bit of a freak occurrence, conceding 5 goals to Meath as well. Like, this is the sort of plan that might unseat them. The one. So 5-9, right? 5-9 is what they scored at the weekend against Kildare. 5-9 is what they scored famously against the Dubs in 2010. The Dubs scored 122 at the weekend. 122 still beats 5-9, and there's no reason to think that they wouldn't score 122 against that Meath team, considering Kildare should have kicked about 118, 119, and only kicked about 14 points in the end. And you'd have to say Dublin are a little bit better than Kildare at the moment. They appear to have a plan when they get the ball. They appear to have a plan when they don't have the ball, so therefore you would say that they're a superior outfit. Well,
I'm going out on a limb there and I'm saying that.
What I will say is that, like, Dublin scored 117 against Meath in last year's Leinster final, and that's not a bad concession against Dublin. You probably need to expect that they're going to score 20 points in some shape or form. The problem with Meath, obviously, last year in the Leinster final was their attack, and they scored 4 points in the Leinster final last year. It's just a terrible, terrible, terrible statistic. And you remember they started that game pretty well. Like, they had their man-marking selections and their matchups at the back seemed to be spot on for the first 10, 15 minutes of the game. And they had a load of chances early on. There were point chances, admittedly, and they just did not have their shooting boots on. They seem to have found that this year, but they seem to be creating loads more goal-scoring opportunities. And I know Tommy's saying that it's coming from opposition turnovers, but still, this is something you've got to be able to take those opportunities when they come, and they're doing that at the moment. 7 goals and 5 goals is a great tally. They'll put themselves in position that they can score 3 goals against Dublin, as long as the other column doesn't read 4. They can get that towards double figures. They can score at least 310. They might have a puncher's chance going down the home stretch, and that's all you can ask for. Because right now, you're getting to the water break, and then Dublin are killing you. It's not even half time anymore.
Okay. 44 minutes past 7 here this morning on OTB AM, OTBAM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. And a reminder, a few of us here on OTB Sports are working on our Mows for November. You can head over to movember.com/Gillette right now to donate. And they've also got special Movember packs in store in Tesco, and a donation will be made to charity for each purchase made. Let's turn our attention to football. Daniel Harris is with us this morning. Daniel, good morning to you.
Hiya.
There's lots to talk about, and the sound of the whining from the managers of the Premier League is going to be the background music for the next few days, asking why the hell do we need international football at all? And I'm sure a lot of people have sympathy with that, but some of our countries actually really need it.
It's the reason why we're having so much international football now isn't just because it's because the associations are short of money. And I think what ultimately it probably comes down to a problem of redistribution, in that there's so much money swimming about in football. And it would be better if it was distributed better, so that the players weren't forced through a succession of almost totally meaningless games, meaning they get injured. But it is difficult because what we've ended up with in football is the domination of the Champions League teams, and that's not a good thing. So it's kind of all these competing interests, none of which are altruistic and none of which are pure. And the ones which win do not necessarily mean they are the ones which are more righteous. So I feel it's unfortunate for the clubs that this is happening to their players. It's absolutely unfortunate for the players that this is happening for them. But the clubs are complicit in us having got to this point also. And the players are the people who are suffering here, and all they're doing is playing football. And the international associations also are suffering because of the primacy of the club game. But at the same time, they need to have been more sensible in not playing 3 games across a week.
Yeah. And look, they're going to point to the fact that they had no choice because they were trying to make up for stuff. But actually, the problem was that these fixtures exist in the first place in the way that they do. And the redistribution actually is the key point there. If the national associations weren't so broke, they wouldn't be forced to bring the players over. And look, that's a kind of circular argument that we'll end up getting into. One of the immediate things that is worth talking about is the fairly chronic injury list that Liverpool have at the moment through COVID and injuries, some of which are going to be fine. So I think Henderson is not going to play tonight and limped out of the last game, but probably should be okay for the weekend. Salah, Gomez, Thiago, Trent, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Fabinho, and obviously Virgil van Dijk is still out as well. We've long said that this is a squad that can deal with almost anything that football throws at them, including trying to compete in both the Champions League and the Premier League. Maybe the squad, shorn of these players for any significant period of time, suddenly begins to look a bit more human.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I think ultimately what Liverpool have, they have 2 things that they still have. One of them is Klopp, who is the best manager in the world by far. And the other thing is they have confidence and belief. So they will think that they'll be able to get by this. And I think underpinning that confidence and belief is they have goals. And as long as they've still got those strikers, they will score at least twice in most games, and that will be enough to win most games. Of course, it will make a difference. If they still don't have any decent centre-backs when Champions League gets serious, they will probably not win the Champions League. I think that is fair to say. But they will be able to... It's only a month and a half till they can buy someone, and they probably needed another centre-back anyway to play with Van Dijk because none of the other options were all that good. So they might have planned to do that in the summer. I guess they'll probably do that in January now if they can find the right one. And even if they can't find the right one, they might do it anyway. So they don't actually have that long to hang in there. And it's really still missing Van Dijk that is the main thing. Ultimately, they're not going to win or not win the league because they don't have Joe Gomez, I wouldn't have thought. Go on.
No, that was
Sorry,
it.
Go on. I was just going to follow up on that point that I think you were going to make anyway, just about Joe Gomez. You feel that there was a drop-off anyway and that an upgrade on Joe Gomez might have been required regardless of fitness?
Yeah, it's not essential. But if you were looking at Liverpool's team and you were thinking, well, where is the weakness? Where should they strengthen? Next to Van Dijk would be the obvious area. So, yeah, they strengthened in midfield in the summer. They strengthened up front in the summer. And, Van Dijk's partner is obviously not as good as Van Dijk, whoever it is, whether it's Gomez, whether it's Matip. So that would have been the next place that you would go anyway. And I imagine that will be the place that they will go, and they'll try and go there if they can in January. But finding the right player is difficult because there's a dearth of decent centre-backs, which is one of the reasons people are so obsessed with Van Dijk, who is excellent. I wouldn't want it to be said that I'm not saying Van Dijk isn't excellent. He is. But there was a time kind of 10 years ago where you had John Terry, you had Rio Ferdinand, you had Sol Campbell, you had Ledley King. And that was just, Nemanja Vidic. That was just in the Premier League. And there aren't centre-backs really in the world of that quality knocking about anymore. So Liverpool's transfer system has worked almost perfectly over the last 5 years or so, where in general, if you think that having a 50% hit rate on players that you buy is pretty good, and Liverpool probably up there around 80, 90%, it's incredible. So they would obviously be hoping that they will be able to now go and find the right player, whoever it might be, and that they'll be relying on their system that is working so well to go and find that player. But the pool is probably quite small. And I think the reason the pool of centre-backs is quite small, particularly, apart from the fact that there aren't very many good ones about, is that it doesn't help you immediately to go and buy potential. With a striker, you can go and buy someone who's 22 and they can turn up and they can be brilliant immediately. With centre-backs, I think the market is smaller because that tends not to happen. There are very, very, very few centre-backs who are brilliant from that age. Van Dijk didn't really start doing anything serious till he was mid to late 20s. But then Rio Ferdinand also was a prodigy, but he didn't get properly good until sort of 23, 24. And so the players that you're looking for, the market is immediately restricted. And if the market itself happens to be small, because it goes like that sometimes, then it's quite hard to find someone who you'll be able to rely upon to come in and immediately start doing a job. However, as I mentioned before, Liverpool have confidence and they have Klopp. So coming in to play for Klopp immediately and coming in to play in a team that knows exactly what it is doing and is full of confidence and has that feeling that it really can't be beaten is something that will help any new signing, whoever they are, even if they're not quite the right player.
Yeah, I can totally see that. We did want to talk a little bit about Jack Grealish and just have a little conversation about. It seems there's been a little bit of a suspicion around Grealish from the big clubs when the whole world was linking Jadon Sancho at Manchester United over the summer. Grealish was there, and nobody really thought about him being one of those players. Like it was mentioned at the start of the year, and he signed his new deal, and then the conversation disappeared. But clearly, in that new deal, there is a buyout clause, or there is a price that Villa would take. No one really made the case that Grealish was worth that money, and I'm wondering now if, after his brilliant start to the season for Villa, followed by, it seems, quite a bit of criticism from the England performance the other night. Does English football really understand what Jack Grealish is and how to get the best out of him?
I think a lot of the managers in club football do. I think the problem you're seeing with the England team now is Gareth Southgate doesn't really know what to do. He doesn't think that his defence is that good, which it isn't, but he's also not sure how to balance the team, because what you're seeing is that adding an extra right back is not necessarily going to give you extra defensive solidity, and it puts you in a situation where you're compromising the strength of the team. So England's strength of the team is clearly going forward. If you look at the attackers they've got Raheem Sterling, they've got Harry Kane, they've got Jadon Sancho, they've got Marcus Rashford, and if they play 4-3-3, they've got to leave out one of them. And that in itself is a difficult decision. Then behind them, they've got Jack Grealish, they've got Phil Foden, they've got Mason Mount. And you wouldn't really want to be in a situation where you could only pick one of them as well. But Gareth Southgate appears to be backing himself into that corner to still not have a particularly good defence. Now, talk about Jack Grealish. I think what happened with him was that in keeping Villa up, he basically priced himself out of a move, in that no one was really going to have 80 million quid to spend on him. So United looked at him, as we know, and they went for Donny van de Beek in the end, who was younger, faster, cheaper, and proven in the Champions League. Now, he might not have Jack Grealish's attitude, and that is one of the great things about Jack Grealish, is he's not scared, and he's someone who turns up in big moments, and he wants the ball, and he's always prepared to take the ball. And you've seen that for England, you saw it for Villa, where he intervened in that final day of the season. He found a way of making sure that he scored the goal that ended up keeping them up. But he was also someone whose off-the-pitch history was checkered, and he was at an age where you began to wonder, if he hasn't resolved it by now, if he was ever going to resolve it. So there's a bit of that. And there's also the fact that I wonder, when I watch him play, I think, what is he? So he looks like someone who you would think would be an attacking midfield player, but he's tending to play off the left at the moment. So if you're a team that already has a good left-sided attacker, then you won't necessarily want to buy Jack Grealish. So United have Marcus Rashford, who plays in that area, and they also have various other attackers. So if you're going to sign Jack Grealish, but actually you can't really play him in midfield and you've got to hide him on the left, then I can see why clubs would look twice at him, even though we can see there's a lot of great things that he can do. So it's slightly tricky if he can't play midfield. If he can play midfield, if he's an attacking midfield player, really, and all he actually needs is better players to play with, then you're looking at a very special talent. But if you're looking at a left winger, then you're generally going to be trying to find someone who can go on the inside or go on the outside and who can score more goals than he will. So it's not easy if he's not a midfield player.
Barney Ronay was writing in The Guardian on Saturday, Daniel, about the superfluous man and how that applies to football in the context of João Felix and how he's finding his feet this year. And he says that we hear that Paul Pogba is lazy, Riyad Mahrez is decorative, Mesut Ozil doesn't want to play. Does the same thing sort of apply to Jack Grealish?
No. I would say in the first instance, Paul Pogba isn't lazy. Like, you don't get to be the phenomenal athlete and footballer that Paul Pogba is if you're lazy. I think the thing with Paul Pogba is that he sometimes plays with a lack of intensity, which is different. And I think that that is not right to say that Paul Pogba's lazy. And it's also that Jack Grealish.
I'm not saying that. Just to clarify, that's not what's being said here at all. That's the incorrect challenge that's put out there, and in fact, it is the things that he brings to the game that is sometimes overlooked because there is that wrong perception of being lazy. So that's not being said here. It's just that is the incorrect take that's out there.
So with Jack Grealish, I'd say the difficulty with him as a player again is where he goes, and it's not that people underestimate what he does. If you watch football and you can't see what Jack Grealish does, then you have some fairly significant problems in your life that need someone other than you to sort out. You watch football and you can see what Jack Grealish does, but how you fit Jack Grealish into a team is another thing. And there used to be, well, can you build the team around such and such a player? It's a particularly fond argument in England that definitely goes back as long as I've been watching football. Can you build a team around Glenn Hoddle? And there's some people will say, well, if you have a player like Glenn Hoddle, you have to build the team around Glenn Hoddle. And the other people say, well, if you have to build the team around anyone, then they shouldn't be in the team because everyone should be able to contribute to the team. I think the reality of the Hoddle situation was that you already had Brian Robson. You didn't need to build the team around Glenn Hoddle. You just needed to put him next to Brian Robson, and you had an unbelievable midfield. But with Jack Grealish, the difference is you wonder where he plays. So I don't see any reason why he couldn't play as in a midfield three. But you could also argue that if you have a player as good as Jack Grealish, you don't want to burden them with defending. And you're kind of seeing it now with United and Bruno Fernandes. Bruno Fernandes could definitely play as a midfield number 8. He's got the athletic ability, he's got the physical capacity, he's got the desire to run up and down. The question is whether you want to ask someone to run like that, to run up and down, or whether you want them preserving their energy to affect the game. And I think with Villa, what happened was Dean Smith realised that he had this one player, particularly once John McGinn got injured, he had this one player who was miles better than anyone else that he had. So what he did was he put him in such a situation where he said, OK, well, he'll put him on the left wing because that way he doesn't have to do a lot of defending, and it means that you get Grealish the ball. Grealish will be fresh when he receives the ball, and you make it work like that. Alan Ball did it at Southampton with Matthew Le Tissier as well, which is not necessarily a relationship that you would ever imagined working. But he realised that Le Tissier was the best player that Southampton had, so he told him didn't have to do any running, got 2 players in there to do Le Tissier's running, so they get the ball to Le Tissier whenever possible. But when you play for England, the players around you are better. And whether Jack Grealish is good enough to say, well, you just hang about over there, that's not so much the case because there are loads of other good players. So what Gareth Southgate needs to probably do, I mean, you need a squad ultimately, but it would be difficult to balance a midfield that had Grealish and Foden in it. So you might need to make a decision which one of those two it's going to be, or as they did at the weekend, they played 2 up front. They played Grealish basically off Harry Kane, and then that to me doesn't look like the best way of doing it. I can't see a way where I think that Jack Grealish is worth Marcus Rashford and Raheem Sterling, or Marcus Rashford and Jadon Sancho. But if they can find a way of getting Grealish into a 3-man midfield, then I'm fairly sure that Grealish would be more than capable of doing that. The question is whether you think that Grealish is better than Phil Foden for me, and I'm not sure that that's the case.
4-2-3-1, where he plays in the 3?
Yeah, he could play in the 3, but again, like you're deciding between Grealish and Foden. I think Grealish is great. I love watching Grealish play. I love his attitude. I love his arrogance. I don't think he's better than Foden, and I don't think he's going to be better than Foden. So what I would be trying to do is I would be trying to get Foden into that team probably before I got Grealish into that team. Although I guess you could run a line that in 2020, so in 2021, next summer, you could maybe think that Foden won't quite be as good as Grealish yet. But I think that Foden is going to be one of the best players in the world. I think that Grealish is going to be an excellent player, but I'm not sure he's going to be quite that good.
I did want to just briefly talk about the other thing that happens over international football is footballers go home, give interviews, the interviews get mistranslated, the whole world loses its mind, and then the proper translation comes out and everybody goes, oh, OK, Paul Pogba just has friends in France that he likes hanging out with. It's not that he automatically compared his situation at Manchester United with the situation with the French national team. Is there anything in this, or is there, like, 'cause I actually watched a little bit of the interview where he's doing its TV interview, which are, you know, it's very hard to misinterpret a TV interview. At least it was broadcast. It wasn't like this has been translated first by the journalist and then again into a different language. So when the story came out, apparently Pogba had kind of, by dint of not actually saying things were bad at Manchester, but by lavishing praise on how great things were in France, insulted the entire city of Manchester and the legion of Manchester United fans around the world.
I don't know. I can see both sides. This is often the case with stuff that Pogba says. Part of me thinks, why don't you just shut up? And part of me thinks, you can say what you like. I think that it doesn't look good to be talking about those kinds of things, but if Pogba doesn't care, why should I care? Ultimately, it doesn't really come down to what he says. It comes down to what he does. And I can understand why he's unhappy that he's not playing. I think that if he's not looking at his own performances as the reason why he's not playing and therefore not happy, then that would be a mistake. And I'm sure that he would happily leave United, and United would happily have him leave if an arrangement could be found that got United enough money and got him a club he wanted to go to. And so ultimately, like, I don't spend too much time analysing what Paul Pogba does and doesn't say, because I'm 41 years old. And he's a footballer saying what he likes and doing what he likes. So if you ask me if I'd be happy for Paul Pogba to leave United as a United supporter, I would say yes. Would I be happy for Paul Pogba to leave to go and find a club and a team that suits him better? Also yes. Paul Pogba's an amazing talent. I want to see Paul Pogba get the most from his talent. And what Paul Pogba needs is a slightly different environment to the environment he has at United. So I'd be more than happy to go and see him do that elsewhere. And I think that what he needs is he needs players around him who are different to the players he has around him at United. I think it didn't look that way at the time. It didn't look that way when Bruno Fernandes arrived. But looking at it now, because after lockdown, what happened was teams weren't fit and United turned up and they looked to be fitter than everyone else and stronger than everyone else. But also, because teams weren't fit, it meant that United could carry a midfield of Pogba and Fernandes. As other teams got stronger, and you saw it when United played West Ham and Southampton at the end of the season, they started running harder, putting United under a bit more pressure, and United struggled to carry Fernandes and Pogba in midfield. And what's happening now is that United are playing Scott McTominay and Fred, and they're running about and allowing Bruno Fernandes just to do his thing. And that's what's working. Yeah. And if you add Paul Pogba into that, you're going to have a slightly different balance. And it's hard to see how that's going to change, because Fernandes is ultimately a better player than Pogba, and his numbers are better than Paul Pogba's. And so it's hard to see where Paul Pogba goes at United. But if he were to go to PSG, which looks like the obvious move for him now, they have legs in midfield, but they lack a bit of class. And that looks to me to be a much better fit for Pogba, where they'll win the league games anyway, and then he can do his thing in the Champions League in particular, where he'll have a lot of legs around him, and he will be in the Bruno Fernandes role. And that's probably what will work best for him, I think.
Tanya, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
All right, see you again.
3 minutes past 8 here on OTBAM. We're going to take a quick break. We're back with a brilliant hour of sport, talking golf with John Duggan before 9. Plenty of GAA to get stuck into with Mickey Quinn and Conor McKeon. Keep an eye out for the latest episode of Scoreboard Jungle next.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
OTB.
In 1927, Cavan Coolidge was President of the United States, and it was the last time Dublin beat Cork in the All-Ireland Hurling Championship. They have met in the championship on 15 occasions, with Cork victorious 12 times, Dublin twice and just a single draw. History, John, would tell us this will be a victory for the Leesiders. However, hurling is usually a game that takes on a life of its own.
OTB live commentary. Never miss the action right here on OTB Sports Radio.
Now, you are welcome along to Scoreboard Jungle. This is our GAA quiz. We're running it right across the championship this winter. We've already had quite a few big names, and we are delighted to welcome Mayo man, Galway supporting Larry Finnerty. Hello, Larry.
How are you, Joe?
So you're nervous about this?
Very, Joe, very. Make them easy. Make them easy.
2 rounds, Larry. OK, we'll start with round 1. So this is the take your points and the goals will come round. Very simple. 5 questions, 30 seconds, 1 point per correct answer. Couldn't be easier. Are you ready?
I'll try.
OK, your time starts now. Who was the 2017 Footballer of the Year?
Andy Moran.
How many All-Ireland final replays have the Mayo Senior Football played in and lost? Finals.
One.
How many points did your son Robert score against Mayo in the league in October?
7.
Who was the first... Oh, I've just started, so we'll finish this one. Who was the first Mayo club to win the All-Ireland Club Senior Football Championship?
Mayo Club, sorry. To win the All-Ireland.
Are you Googling there, lad?
Ballina Stevenites.
All right, so we'll see how you went there. Who was the 2017 Footballer of the Year? Andy Moran was correct. You said how many All-Ireland final replays was the question of Mayo team played in and lost? You said 1. The answer was 2. 96 and 2016, of course.
2016, yeah.
How many points did Robert score against Mayo in the league in October? You said 7 points. That was correct. Good man. And then first Mayo club to win the All-Ireland, it was Crossmolina.
Crossmolina, before Ballina.
Before Ballina. So you are on 2 points, but the next round is the biggie. This is called the going for goal round, Larry. So this has a kind of sudden death quality to it. Basically, each correct answer is worth 3 points. However, if you get a question wrong, you're out. We stop. If you get a question correct, you get your 3 points and we keep going. And you have 30 seconds again. Does that all make sense?
We'll try.
OK. Right, your time starts now. When did a county from Connacht last win the All-Ireland Football Championship?
2001.
The last All-Ireland men's senior final that didn't have a goal in it, Larry?
No clue. I'll go 2017.
Oh, unlucky. It was 15, Dublin and Kerry. So that is a grand total, Larry, of 5 points, which, believe it or not, unlike the fitness tests, means you're not last on the leaderboard.
Good. I'll take it.
The all-new OTB Sports app. It's all videos, sports news, live scores, interviews, podcasts, all waiting for you. Search OTB Sports on your app store and download now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, proud supporters of Movember. Gentlemen, let's move.
Very good morning to you. Welcome back to OTB AM. It's Ger Eoin with you here until 10. Let's hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the number. Mick Killeen on YouTube. David Myler talking sense last night. He knows what he's talking about. Off the ball talking about Stephen Kenny is like CNN or Irish media talking about Biden and the Democrats. Myler is so right when he says you got to earn the right to play out from the back. We have to play to the strength of our players. No point asking them to play like Arsenal. Not sure we're creating real chances either. Maybe chances that Salah would score from, but that's all. Right about Hendrick as well. He is playing better now. Horgan playing decent as well. That's thanks, Mick. I guess, I don't know, maybe people do think that, but I don't think it's true. I don't, you know, we can get into that if you want. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Let me tell you about this. There are only 7 counties left in the 2020 GAA Football All-Ireland Senior Championships, and Super Value, as part of their Support Where You're From campaign, have given us some great prizes to give away. We want to see your memorabilia. We want you to dig out your favourite ticket stub, match programme, jersey, photo with your hero, any GAA-related items that you've been dying to tell the country about. Make a 30-second video explaining its significance. Get them into us on WhatsApp on 0879 180 180, and we'll choose a winner every Friday morning during the championship. Each weekly winner lands a €200 voucher for a Super Value near you, and also the chance to star in Super Value's Super Fans series. It's a fly-on-the-wall peek inside the homes of dedicated supporters around the country. Super Value, proud sponsors of the GAA Football All-Ireland Senior Championships. Check out facebook.com/Super Value Ireland for more details from that there. Very quickly, time for the sports pages.
OTB AM.
The Irish Times, OTBSports.com, Ireland goalkeeping coach Alan Kelly sits out the Bulgaria game over health concerns. He's got asthma. I'm loving it. I'm confident in my body. Man of the Match award as Dan Levy makes a try-scoring full return. He started the game last night. They dropped a 50 burger in Edinburgh and they won. A lot of the hoops, McAniff proud to join Rovers international set. I don't think Conor Murray at number 10 is an option. Ron O'Gara saying it would be kicking the teeth to everybody else. And we bow down to Tony Kelly. He's unmarkable, says Shane McGrath. I guess you've got to try, right? The Irish Times, their lead today is Kevin McStay's column. You have two choices against Dublin. You huddle in the trench or you go out into no man's land. If it wasn't for bad luck, would Kenny have any luck at all? If I had ducks, they'd drown, was Nicky English's famous comment. Back in 87, I think, was it the Munster final? Was it the Munster final replay? Maybe somebody will correct me on that one. Who will reign supreme? This is the hurling, the counties that are left. And Sweeney looking to make up for lost time. This is Cork against Tip in the football at the weekend. Davy Fitz is staying on as well as the back page headline there. The tabloids all fairly similar. More woe for Kenny. Cluster fudge is the back page of the Sun. How many more? That's Mourinho. He's going to be annoyed that Doherty has come down there. The Telegraph, Jackie Stewart wants them tonight. Lewis Hamilton. Maybe Lewis Hamilton should not take the knighthood, and that would be a really important step forward. You know, saying that I'm not going to bend the knee for you. Why should I? The Irish Daily Mail, testing times. Anxious wait for Kenny ahead of Bulgaria clash, and provinces run riot as Levy is back in the startup. And James Lowe is saying that the Ireland captain should be James Ryan. London Times, Hamilton's honours hurdle. Living in tax haven could prevent knighthood. Wow, Jesus. Who cares? Australian Open fears. Novak Djokovic hoping the Australian Open will go ahead for the sake of tennis, amid growing concerns that strict health protocols and complex travel issues will mean first Grand Slam event of 2021 will not take place. Couldn't they just kick it back a couple of months? Wouldn't that be the thing to do? The Guardian there. 5 is safer than 3. This is Southgate wants subs, and Hamilton just got really more expensive, says Mercedes Wolf. That's pretty much it. So I didn't do the Irish Indo for you. Back page of the Indo. COVID chaos adds to Kenny task. And Lowe backs Unique Ryan to lead Ireland for the first time in Twickenham clash. Anything specific catching your eye this morning, Owen?
Kevin McStay in the Irish Times writing about a couple of things, largely about Dublin. He goes back to this old issue about Dublin playing their games in Croke Park. He says it's beyond me why their regular opponents, the likes of Mayo and Kerry and Tyrone, and teams who play in Croke Park don't kick up a stink about this. Until they do, nothing will change. You could say it's strange timing to be bringing up this conversation given the hill is empty, given the advantage of Dublin playing in Croke Park is definitely less this year. But I never really thought about it this way, that it might actually take a big county kicking up that sort of fuss that might actually change this. It's not going to happen via Leinster Council, via Central Council, because you can fit more people into Croke Park. I guess it's in their interest to have more bums and seats in Croke Park, whereas it might take a big county to actually say, no, screw you, I'm not playing my semi-final in your backyard. I know Donegal did something similar for the Super 8s game a couple of years ago, but there was a little bit of a loophole in the rules that allowed that to not go the distance. But that's one to keep an eye on maybe next year. Imagine doing it this year, though, if you're Mayo coming up against Dublin in an All-Ireland final and saying, you know what, Gaelic grounds, that's where we're going to play you. Nobody should bring us to Dublin. Maybe this is the year to do something like that. He's also talking about Mayo, and he's talking about how they're getting their scores at the weekend. He's got RTE's stats person to help him out here. And one of the lines about Mayo from Sunday was that 11 of their 14 points came from steals. So McStay is asking the question, where are their scores from their own creativity? And they say that, you know, bad shooting has been a problem for Mayo for years now. McStay is making that point. But he also says that maybe Mayo don't actually value possession enough, that they don't look after their possession as preciously as, say, Dublin do, and that they don't attempt shots just from a scoring zone, that they have an attempt and they think to themselves, I will get the ball back in the next play.
And Jimmy Gittis' column will be the counterpoint to that exactly this week, saying the time for us all to be fetishising possession is past. Let's get over this. So an interesting little debate happening there in the between the two columnists. Right, Mickey Quinn is with us. Let's talk football. Good morning to you, Mickey. How are you getting on?
Morning, Ger.
Tommy, very excited, obviously. Meath scoring goals for fun. It's two massive underdogs, notwithstanding that this weekend. If you're in the Meath dressing room, if you're in the Meath Brains Trust, and you're looking at the dubs, is there anything you've seen that would give you, as an underdog, hope going into this game this weekend?
Yeah, probably the first half performance against Laois is something that definitely stands out. I was looking at it, I think they had 14 negative turnovers attacking inside 45. So 14 times they went inside 45 and the ball came straight back out, which is very uncharacteristic like Dublin. There was a lot of turnovers. I think they had 52 entries in total into the 45, and of that, I think they had a total of 25 negative turnovers for the game, which that's not like Dublin. As soon as, usually when they have an attack, they want to finish with at least a shot on goal, and a lot of them came from just silly turnovers, which isn't like them.
Like, what kind of, is there a pattern to the turnovers, for example? Is it carelessness in possession? Is it not having a support runner? Is it just being a bit weak in the tackle compared to how they would normally have been? Probably
taking it for granted, probably that, you know, they're probably trying to express themselves a little bit more and play football and go for that kick pass. Whereas I think once they get out of Leinster, it's almost like, okay, take care. Like Kieran Kilkenny, his hand pass and his distribution is always up 90% plus. He doesn't give the ball away. And he was probably one of the ones at the weekend that didn't either. But little passes that were forcing a kick past the inside forward line and it's spraying out, especially this time of year. It's not ideal situations to be playing it in and it coming straight back out. So I think that's something that Meath could be looking at, that if you can match up your men really well and battle them one-on-one, that if that ball does come in and win it and turn them over, it's a big coup for them. But like, I jotted down 5 points to beat the Dubs. It's that simple. Executing it, it's a different ball game. So just tight defensively, limiting their goal chances. I know they created a good few goal chances against Laois, but their keeper pulled off some great saves and stopped that. But if you can limit their goal chances, last year's All-Ireland final, they only got the one, which is massive. But then you got to be able to force them to make those turnovers. So make the turnovers, and then I think this is where Meath probably, they hadn't the legs last year and probably hadn't their game plan fully developed, that the next point is to transition at pace quickly and get numbers with that break. And I think that's where most people, and I think Jim McGuinness has mentioned it too, that's the second part to beating Dublin. There's no point in setting up defensively and sitting back and waiting for the flood banks to break. You got to be able to go at them when you get the chance, and transitioning at pace is going to be huge. And those negative turnovers are something that when you do get a turnover, you got to go quick and support your play. And that's where Dublin are really, really good at cynical fouls and getting away with them and fouling up high up the field to avoid being caught. And then after that, once you get that far up the field, you got to take your chances. So shooting efficiency is going to be huge, and where your shots are from. Dublin will force you to shoot from outside your scoring area, or what you want to shoot from, but trying to get inside that defensive line, and that's up to the inside forwards and the forwards to run at their man and take them on and get by them. And then the big one after that is your own kickouts. You gotta win and have plans for your own kickouts. Because if we look back to Laois at the weekend, they probably had over 30, 35 kickouts at least. And you got to make the most of them. Their opportunities to go at Dublin. I think most teams, when you're playing Dublin and that relentlessness that they have, you take it as an opportunity to maybe rest and get your breath and just slow things down. But that's what Dublin want. They can set up a press, a 4-4-3 press up high up the field and force you to try and kick long. And when you're kicking long to Brian Fenton and James McCarthy at midfield, they're really going to hammer right back in on top of you, and you're starting from scratch again.
Last year, we saw this game, as Owen has already laid out his parameters for tomorrow's power rankings. We saw me not have scoring efficiency and essentially not be able to trouble Dublin enough to make their ability. So they did quite well in thwarting Dublin, but they didn't do enough to suggest they were going to be able to attack. It was a kind of a pale version of the original manifestation of Jim McGuinness's Donegal. This year they look like a team who, notwithstanding what their manager is saying, have absolutely been working on scoring goals. And because, you know, it's not a fluke that they've done what they've done to the first 2 games in Leinster. And it's not a fluke that every time any of their inside forwards gets the ball from 35 yards out, he's thinking, there's a goal on here. I'm not just going to chip this over.
Definitely. Like even there, the Wicklow game, prime example to put things into place, like 7 goals against Wicklow. It's been a while since we've even seen 7 goals in a championship game from one team. I don't know, have Dublin done it the last number of years? I know Mayo put up a huge number of goals a couple of years back in Connacht, but like 7 is huge, and like that's something that they obviously went after. One of the big things for their goals is Brian Menton coming through the middle and the way he supports it, and he's the initial line breaker, and then other lads feed off that, the likes of Cian O'Sullivan coming off his shoulder, some of the wing backs, and then you have Jordan Morris, that's his good movement and getting in the right place at the right time. So 4 goals in 2 games for him is super. The goal of the weekend, the first goal after half-time, Jordan Morris's first goal, I think it was 4 guys bearing down on the penalty box looking for a hand pass. Like, even if Jordan Morris didn't take that goal chance, he had 3 guys to his left-hand side that he could have squared. And that support run, that doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen by accident. They're obviously putting a huge emphasis on it in training, getting up there and supporting that man. Usually what happens is the ball is played into the inside forward and okay, off you go, do your job. But when you have wing backs, wing forwards, even midfielders bombing through, it really causes hassle. And Brian Fenton, prime example for Dublin, the way he set up Bugler for his goal, bombing forward, broke the line inside 45, and then just that execution of a hand pass. And I think it's taken for granted how crisp those hand passes have to be to create those goal chances. And Fenton's was for Bugler. You look at the down Cavan game, there's one there across the goals, and it was kind of a missed opportunity. So those kind of things, they don't happen by accident, and it's clear that Meath have been working on them.
It's interesting looking at your 5-point plan to beat Dublin, Mickey, that 2 of those things are winning your own kickouts and transitioning at pace quickly. They were 2 of the things that Donegal did extremely well in that 2014 semi-final. And while Dublin seem to have changed a lot since then, it does seem that the best way to beat them has not changed that much.
I don't think so. Like, everyone probably gets caught up in the whole Cluxton kickouts, but in order for Cluxton to have a kickout, you have to kick a score or kick a wide. And I think that's the second part of the plan. Do you know, if Meath had 4 points last year, I don't know how many wides they kicked. Do you know, they might have had maybe 10 kickouts. Cluxton had 10 kickouts, and Dublin would have had up on 30 kickouts. So, Meath would have had 30 kickouts. So Donegal with Patton and goals is something that I think that's why people are excited. He offers something for Donegal that it's been a while. Big Papa Durkin was someone that was able to do that before, kicking it over a high press and getting it to the likes of Michael Murphy as an outlet. So Patton has been phenomenal for Dublin, and you look back at the goal chances that they created their first game this year, the way they beat the press over the top and just runners coming onto it, and that transition at pace, that's something that it's the way forward for any team that's trying to play football, and it's having the personnel to work that system. So having a keeper that has a long kick out and can be accurate, and then having men that can win that ball over the top too.
Let's talk a little bit about the Cavan Donegal game in some more details. For Cavan to be a team who can overcome what they've overcome, the 2 big holes that they dug for themselves, they know that they can get a period of a game where they're going to have dominance, and they know that they can play with some freedom and abandon. Now, it did take the last 5 minutes of the first game where it looked like it was a complete lost cause for them to get back to that point, but there must be a real sense of confidence that actually there will be a period of this game where we can create. How do they start the game like that, Mickey?
Jeez, the confidence they must have had from, especially after last weekend, they have just came over a 6-point turnaround against Monaghan, turning that around then into a 10-point turnaround against Down. You know, they're on top of the world, but the big thing now is, can they avoid coughing up a lead like that and try and stay nip and tuck with Donegal for as long as possible, or even get out in front and get them chasing? And that's something that they'll be talking about. And the more you talk about it, the more that it goes the opposite way. But like, they've got the calibre of players that can cause Donegal problems. Ger Eoin around the midfield will be huge for Cavan. Tomas Galligan, where is he going to set up as well? Those kind of matchups are going to be crucial for Cavan to threaten Donegal. And I think winning primary ball around the middle will be massive. It's probably slightly different, a different setup with Ulster football. It mightn't be as quick, and that transition and a pace mightn't be suit Cavan at the weekend. But I think possession will be key, and not to give it away. Because as we've seen at the weekend, the way Donegal can counter-attack can cause serious problems. And the last thing Cavan want to do is cough up goal chances or even an early goal and have to chase Donegal, because we've seen what they've done to Armagh. And Armagh are no bad team. But the way they blitzed them in the first half last week, Cavan will be very aware of that. And Mickey Graham is an astute tactician. He's not gonna let that happen. He's got to an Ulster final last year and again this year, and that doesn't happen by accident. I know they've been relegated this year, but I think results kind of went against them a little bit. You look at Mayo relegated, Connacht champions, and now you have Cavan relegated, albeit another division lower, and now in an Ulster final. So it's going to be interesting. I think the matchups on both sides is going to be telling. Who's going to go with Michael Murphy? I think Faulkner could be the one to go with him. Physically strong and can mix it. But Langan at the weekend for Donegal was someone that really stepped up, and I think he's going to play a big part this weekend again.
There's a school of thought out there, Mickey, that you should never surrender the kick out, and that's just sacrilege completely. Is that the case for Sean Patton, though? Is there a case, especially when he's got the wind at his back?
Definitely.
Let him go short.
It was something that crossed my mind even before this morning, that, I think you do have to, and I think Cavan are the kind of team that did prefer to do that than come out all guns blazing. I think they've done it similarly against Rory Beggan. So I think, and maybe Monaghan didn't use it as well as they would have liked. They kind of sat back too much. But I think exactly what you've mentioned there. I think Cavan offered up the kick out short against Monaghan because they didn't want to get caught over the top. And I think Patton probably has a bigger boot on him, and probably with the likes of Michael Murphy at midfield or out around the centre forward area, they're going to be way more dangerous on long kickouts than Monaghan were. So they'll be definitely aware of that. And I think early on, definitely it's something that they'd like to do, is give them the short kick out and get numbers behind the ball and keep it defensively tight for as long as possible.
With your 5-point plan, say Meath pull that off, how much of a chance do you actually give them a win in the game?
If Dublin played the way they did in the first half, and that if Meath can come in 4 or 5 points up at half time, then definitely they're in a position. But I think one of the things that we probably haven't mentioned is the fatigue side of things. Like when you've Niall Scully running up and down the line, and then you have Brian Howard coming off the bench, and then you've Paul Mannion coming off the bench. I think that's something that you've gone to the stage now where you almost accept what Dublin have on the bench, and okay, that's grand. But especially when teams have been playing week in, week out, and the fatigue or the fitness levels mightn't be able to carry it. That's the worrying side of things. Especially, it was 55 minutes in the Laois game, and okay, it was almost like, right, this is it, another 15 minutes to go, and that's where Dublin really hammer it home and hammer teams. But if Meath can get goals early, it'll make it interesting. Definitely a lot more interesting than a lot of the Dublin Leinster games the last number of years.
That would be the least we could ask for, and I think we'd all look forward to that. Mickey, great to have you with us. That was brilliant. Thanks a million.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, lads.
It's Mickey Quinn there, Longford footballer, of course, a teacher in St Mel's as well, with some very thoughtful insight into how to. As he said, it's easy to write it down on paper, but actually executing it then is something different, Owen. Yeah,
and Dublin are obviously, it sometimes seems, at a different stratosphere when it comes to their strength and conditioning and to their mindset, that if there's one team in the country who are going to blow past you with 15 minutes left in the game, it is going to be Dublin. But if there's one team in the country who are going to get over it if they go through a bad start, it's probably Dublin as well. They have the mind and they have the body so well trained that if there is any bit of a setback at the weekend, you expect them to recover from it almost immediately. And that is almost the most fearsome thing about this team, that chinks in the armour can be exposed, but then they quickly side you with a quick break or an amazing kick out or just a piece of individual brilliance. They have every element of their game off to a T, and they're near impossible to beat. But the best we can hope for, and it's like, you don't want to get into the realm of moral victories on any level, but if Meath managed to put up a far better performance and a contest that lasts close to 3/4 of the game this weekend, then that will mark progress. That will be the first step towards one day actually beating Dublin in the Leinster Championship.
Yeah. I mean, look, maybe we're just looking for incremental progress here as opposed to a smash and grab. I think maybe a smash and grab is your best chance here with the Winter Championship. I'm just not sure that we're going to see it this weekend. But I actually think it's going to be a little bit closer than the 10 points that is the current predicted margin of outcome for the Dubs. The one thing that's slightly underrated in all this is that Dublin will fight you as well. Like they have more niggle about them than we give them credit for. You obviously don't reach the top and sustain a period of dominance the way they have done without having that. But it's underrated and not spoken about because no one ever actually goes and takes that fight to them anymore.
Not since Mayo really has a team got into a proper fight with them. There was a fairly tempestuous affair against Laois a couple of years ago where Johnny Cooper goes in high and gets a yellow card, I think, and there was a lot of talk after that about the edge that Dublin had to show. It's always a good sign if Dublin come out swinging against you. Like, I mean, you have to kind of start a fight against Dublin, I think, in many ways. It's something Mayo did very successfully in getting under their skin.
Was that when you compared him to Real Madrid centre-back?
Oh yeah, I compared him to Sergio Ramos. That was a great comparison.
That was. It has subsequently been stolen by many people. Right, 8:32 this morning here. Let's talk about the Dubs in some more detail and who the new Dubs are and who might be in danger of actually missing out on the team. I'm delighted to say Conor McKeon of the Independent Group is with us. Conor, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, man.
So obviously a lot of people will not have had their full attention on Dublin Laois at the weekend because there was some other stuff happening at the same time. They could be forgiven for that. What kind of a performance was it? Like in terms of characterising this, like was this about blooding new players? Was it about getting the machine oiled? What was it? What was the point of the weekend's performance, and what were the takeaways?
It was a staple from the genre of underwhelming 22-point victories over a Division 2 opposition that really only Dublin can do, and they do it with such sort of regularity now. It's hard to bat an eyelid at it. The thing about this season for Dessie Farrell is he has very, very few games now. Like, there's only 3 left if they go all the way to a final, and I think they approached last Saturday's game as if it was, the Leinster final and All-Ireland semi-final. There was nothing out there that was in any way experimental. They went through the process of winning a game from start to finish, as they always do. And it wasn't particularly good at the start. And towards the end, they kind of crushed Laois. And it was just one of those games where you're kind of looking at it saying, Dublin aren't really going too well here. And, this isn't a great performance. And you look up at the scoreboard and they're 14 points up. And they're starting to dominate the kick out. And they're creating a chance with every possession that they get. So, it's what they do exceptionally well. Like Mike Quirk made the point afterwards, and it's a fair point, that you don't give credit to the level of skill execution that Dublin have, because a lot of the stuff they do is quite low risk. But, in making sure that every hand pass goes perfectly into the stride of the runner, in making sure that the forward doesn't have to stoop down to pick up the ball off the ground, they can create scoring chances within 7 or 8 passes without ever anybody having to be a hero or without having a particularly high risk of turning the ball over. And they can do that 30 times in the game. So, that's what you're starting off from you know, against Dublin, you know that they're going to be able to generate scoring chances. You know that, like, they nearly go into this kind of zombified state in those matches where they're not paying attention to the opposition or the scoreboard or the referee or anything else. They're just running plays. They're just creating scoring chances. They're just trying to turn the opposition over. So, you know, for any team, and obviously Meath are next in line, I think, you know, the way to go about that, trying to beat them, or even trying to upset them, is you can't allow them to get into that rhythm. You know, like, you have to do something extreme because, you know, over the course of 75 minutes, if the game is played on those terms, they're definitely going to beat you.
What would something extreme look like?
Well, you kind of have to do a lot of things. Like, you know, like if you go back to the 2016 All-Ireland semi-final and Kerry got 2 goals off Cluxton's kickouts just before half-time, you know, and the whole energy in the stadium changed. Now, even still, like, that's as extreme as you can possibly go. That's as much as you can possibly get off a specific tactic. And yet Dublin came out at the start of the second half, and I think they probably kicked, was it 6 of the first 7 points of the second half, and all of a sudden kind of took the game over. So you have to do something like that. Like, you're only going to get pockets of dominance, and I just think that you have to maximise them. And obviously goals will be a big talking point this week because Meath have scored so many of them. But the idea that you're going to create more scoring chances and reel Dublin in by only scoring 1 goal or by outshooting them from points, that's not going to happen. So, you know, I really, like, Kevin McStay wrote an interesting column this morning in the Irish Times, and he spoke about the last time he managed against Dublin in Croke Park, and what they took away from the game, despite the fact that they got hammered, was the fact that they created so many goal-scoring chances. And I think that is an area that you're just going to have to, you know, I know we don't talk about XG, expected goals in Gaelic football, but, you know, if we did, you're going to have, you know, you're going to have to score 2/3 of all your goal-scoring chances and create an awful lot of them. Because, as I said, the game is too long. They generate too many scoring chances. And if the game is just kind of played at that very pedestrian level where, you know, they generate scoring chance, you try and generate scoring chance, I just think that they're almost certain to win.
I have to say, right, on that point, it looks to me like Andy McEntee is the first Leinster manager in a decade who has looked at the existing problem and tried to build a team that is built to overcome it. And it makes perfect sense. And for that, he deserves some credit, I think.
Yeah, no, I do too. Like, I think the only problem with me going into this game is how kind of raw a lot of the players are. I think this is probably the first year that Meath will go into Croke Park with a team that's physically capable of going with Dublin. Like, up until now, you could see the physique of the players probably wasn't as impressive as the Dublin players. You can see that late on in the game, Dublin are still playing at a level that the opposition are fading from, like, athletically and physically. When I think now there's been so much work has gone into this Meath squad since Andy McEntee came in, because Andy McEntee, through his own experiences as Dublin or as Meath minor manager, as Ballyboden St Enda manager, he knows what's required. He knows the level that you have to get to before you can, you know, claim that you're going to be the team that beats Dublin. So I think that Meath are now at that level, and even the young players that have come in, like Shane Walsh came into the Meath squad as a minor, but he came in as a minor who was a man, you know. And it's the same with Jordan Morris as well. Like, I think Jordan Morris is only 20, and he didn't even feature prior to this year's league and the second half of the league. But, like, physically, he looks like he's going to be capable for that level. The fear with Meath is just that so many of them are so young. Like, Matthew Costello scored 1-1 at the weekend, and loads of talent. But I think this is probably where Andy McEntee would like to have been in his first year as Meath manager. This is now kind of the base level. You're taking the pitch against Dublin, at least physically and athletically capable of staying with them for the majority of the match. Like, that's the first requirement. You don't even get off the ground unless you have that. And I think Meath do have that going into the weekend. And for that reason, I think we'll have a much more interesting game, particularly in the early stages, than we had in the last few years. The question is whether they can keep with Dublin football-wise, whether they can, you know, execute what they're trying to execute to the same level as Dublin can, because, you know, up until now, nobody has been able to do that.
Yeah, I guess half of it is about picking your moments as well, Conor. Like, I mean, you talk about that full court press on Cluxton that's been done in the past. It's probably about, you know, making it to the water break, having your chat at the water break, going full court press for the next 10 minutes, and then for the last 5 minutes of the half, pulling off again, because there are certain ways that we have seen Dublin being put under pressure, but they always come from an unbelievably strenuous amount of play from the other team, where you can't possibly keep that up for 70, 80 minutes.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, the law of averages, you know, it's like the match is too long and the pitch is too big. Dublin are going to get you and they're going to score more than you. And you're probably going to have to turn the game late on. If you go in 5 points ahead at half time, that's nearly the worst possible position to be in because Dublin know exactly what they have to do. So, it was a little bit like Pat Gilroy said after the 2011 All-Ireland final, the secret to winning that All-Ireland was going ahead in the 71st minute because they didn't have to protect the lead. Because can you imagine that you're in a situation you're 2 or 3 points up on Dublin going into the last 5-6 minutes of a game? Like the temptation there would be to preserve everything you have and have 15 guys standing on the line. But that's exactly when Dublin are going to get on top of you. And when it comes down to, like we haven't seen it this year, and I don't know whether we'll see it at the weekend, Dublin in a tight game. But the thing that has defined them in tight games over the last few years is their ability to make the right plays at the key moments in the game. Now, obviously, we didn't have to see that last weekend because there was no real key moment of the game. Once they went ahead, they were gone. But so I suppose the point I'm making is even if you get into that situation, even if you get a couple of goals, even if you put them under pressure and you're neck and neck or even ahead going into the final gallop, Dublin's track record of making those clutch plays late in games, like we saw it so many times against Mayo, we saw it plenty of times against Kerry in the last decade. It's really, really high, and they've never failed to do it. So, you have to take that into account as well.
Can we talk about some of the new blood? Because there's quite a significant change in the team. It's we were talking about Liverpool earlier on, how easy it is for players to come in when the team has confidence and you're winning. And it seems as if Dublin have been able to, over the last couple of years, integrate players like Merchant came in, didn't bat an eyelid. Nobody kind of thought, okay, Paddy Small is finally making the breakthrough at the level that we thought that he would be at maybe a couple of years previous to this. Tom Lahiff is starting games. You said that they treated the Laois game as if it was an All-Ireland semi-final. Could you see a similar team starting an All-Ireland final or an All-Ireland semi-final?
Yeah, I think the guys that have the jerseys now have them, and there's no way that Dessie Farrell will veer from that. The only thing I'll say about the couple of players you mentioned there, like Brian Howard, I think maybe came back into the squad after the league carrying a slight injury, and I can't imagine Brian Howard, a fully fit Brian Howard, not starting in the Dublin team. So whether that's in the half-forward line or in midfield besides Brian Fenton, I would imagine it's going to be in midfield now beside Brian Fenton, because I think in the absence of Jack McCaffrey, Dessie Farrell is very eager to have James McCarthy at wing back, so they have that kind of line-breaking, ball-carrying option. So I think as the team kind of evolves slightly over the next few weeks, I can imagine Brian Howard coming in for Tom Lahiff. He wasn't in any way bad at the weekend, but he wasn't hectic either. And with Paddy Small as well, probably didn't have his best game last weekend. Now his club form was very, very strong, and he was excellent for Dublin in the 2 league games before the championship started. But I suppose the jersey that he has for the last few years, like Paul Mannion has won 3 All-Stars in a row in that position for the last 3 years, and the expectation would be maybe that if Mannion is fully fit, he'll probably start there. So, over the next couple of weeks, if Dublin win at the weekend, by the time they make an All-Ireland semi-final, I would imagine that Howard and Mannion will be back in the team, but maybe not. Maybe with the absence of Dermot Connolly and a couple of the older players, Bernard Brogan and Owen O'Gara, maybe Dessie Farrell wants to have Paul Mannion and Brian Howard on the bench, for a situation where they're still in the game with 10 minutes to go and they need to bring on some real quality. But I'd expect that if they don't start this weekend, if Dublin go beyond this weekend, that Mannion and Howard will be back in the team, and maybe Tom Lahiff and Paddy Small will, they're definitely the two that are kind of competing for those jerseys.
Robbie McDade, is he a starter nailed on in the half-back line?
Yeah, it looked like it. I think, without Jack McCaffrey, there was never any danger that Dublin were going to go scouring the landscape for a Jack McCaffrey clone, because, it doesn't exist. So I think in that sort of situation, Dublin had to pick, if you want to call it a more sort of prototype wing back, and Robbie McDade is that. Like Robbie McDade and Dessie Farrell, like Robbie McDade was full back in the Dublin minor team when Dessie Farrell was manager, so they know each other very well, and he had an outstanding club campaign for Ballyboden right up until the final. So he's a guy who's in form and who's been around that dressing room and that scene and knows the culture and knows what they're about for a long, long time. It's obviously a step up to be playing in that level of match, but I think what Robbie McDade has is that he's an excellent man marker. So if the opposition are trying to sort of judge their matchups and they take McDade as being maybe the least experienced of the back six. Well, he's actually one of the best man markers that are in the back six there. Right. So it's not as if he's a kind of a weakling necessarily, but obviously he doesn't give you the same attacking dimension that Jack McCaffrey does. But then, you know, nobody else really does either.
Is there any change in a Dessie Farrell team from the Jim Galvin team so far?
No, it's funny. Dublin kind of nearly lets you decide, you know, what the terms of engagement are. So, like, most teams don't really press. You know, not just against Dublin, but most teams don't really press anymore. They kind of squeeze, so that everyone plays with a +1, and then they kind of give you possession and kind of shepherd you. But there's always an out ball, and you know, when the game is played on those terms, which it is in the majority of the time, Dublin will do what they did against Laois, which is work the ball up the pitch, doing nothing spectacular, taking no particular risks, and create a huge number of scoring chances. And they did that under Jim Galvin, and they're doing it under Dessie Farrell. You know, if you play a very low block and you try and do what Tyrone did in 2017 or 18, Dublin run those plays in their sleep. And I imagine, we haven't seen it yet, a team try it against Dublin, but I would imagine that they will revert to that game plan if they did. What we haven't seen is, you know, what Mayo did in the 2017 All-Ireland final is some team go full press against Dublin for the entire game to back themselves, that every time a Dublin player turns around and tries to win possession, he's coming under intense physical pressure. You know, what they would do in that situation, I don't know, because we haven't kind of got there. But, you know, as for how they play the game, it's pretty much the same as before. One of the key differences is that Kieran Kilkenny is starting to spend a bit more time as an inside forward, particularly late on in the games. Dublin are trying to generate a one-on-one in there because he's such a good ball winner. Now, they had started to do that a small bit under Jim Galvin in his final year, so maybe that was, you know, a part of the evolution that was already happening. But I suppose the thing that's hard to figure out at the moment is Conor McKeon seems to be playing a lot of his football further out the pitch, nearly as a foraging wing forward, which, you know, obviously isn't the role he's played the last couple of games. But I would imagine those two things are fairly interchangeable, and you know, we'll definitely see this weekend maybe a clearer picture of what Dublin are about, because when they're being put under a little bit more pressure, I think, you know, those elements of their game plan become a little bit clearer as to what exactly they're trying to do. All
right, good stuff, Conor. Thanks for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Cheers, lads.
It's Conor McKeon there from the Independent Group, talking to us about the Dubs this weekend. If you'd like to get in touch, 0879 180 180 is the number. Loads of people coming in talking on that about rugby. Peter says, Jameson Gibson Park's quick ball and less of those useless box kicks made for better attacking rugby by Ireland. I'm a big fan of Farrell in the centre. He always drew two Wales players to the tackle. Faulty Old Boy says, as of this morning, Sexton and Henshaw will not be available for the match in Twickenham. So Farrell and Aki in the centre. I hope that Keenan is left at full-back with Andrew Conway and Lowe on the wings. So who gets selected at 10 and who is the backup? Well, it seems like Burns is going to get selected at 10. He's going to come through the HIA. And who is the backup? I guess it's going to be Ross Byrne. Billy Burns and Ross Byrne and Hugo Byrne and Ed Byrne and all the other Burns. There's a lot of Burns in this team. England to beat us by 30, says Rory very succinctly. So that is definitely in one of the field of outcomes that we could have at the weekend. John Duggan is here. John, good morning to you. How are you?
Ger Eoin, good morning. They say Burns night, but this is Burns morning here on OTB AM.
There you go. Burns week.
Burns week, yeah. So just go through the sports news before we talk about the golf. Shamrock Rovers duo Graham Burke and Aaron McAniff joining up with the Republic of Ireland squad now for this match against Bulgaria in the Nations League. Tomorrow, no wins under Stephen Kenny, no goals in the last 6 games. James McLean and Matt Doherty testing positive for COVID. Jose Mourinho going on Instagram, not happy about it at all, in a kind of sarcastic post. Adam Ida dropped out of the panel because of injury. Alan Kelly, the goalkeeping coach, not travelling on health grounds. Stephen Kenny calling up from the under-21 squad, Troy Parrish and Jack Taylor. So Derby County's Jason Knight, a very promising player, hoping the boys in green can find the net.
It's going to be a big game on Wednesday evening, so we just know we need to go there and get a result, and it's at home, so just a bit of luck sometimes needs to fall our way, but it's just struggling to put the ball in the back of the net at the moment, and hopefully things will change soon.
Now, the Pro 14 was on last night. Really big wins for Leinster and Ulster, but what is the test for these players? Well, Cian Callagher, a confidence boost for him, a hat-trick of tries in a 50 points to 10 thrashing of Edinburgh at the RDS. Leo Cullen happy with the night's work.
We had a pretty experienced group, if you think, particularly in the forwards. A lot of guys have played a lot of matches for Leinster over the years. So, Yeah, and like it's tricky conditions as you can see. But overall, I think particularly that first half, the way we play, variety in our attack in particular, and that clinical edge in terms of taking some of the opportunities that were there. So overall, lots of good things in the game.
Marcel Coetzee, 4 tries for Ulster in their 57 points to 14 pasting of Zebra in Italy last night. Ronan O'Gara on the show last night doesn't think that Conor Murray will occupy the out-half berth in the match against England. Twickenham on Saturday, we got Billy Burns, Ross Byrne, as you said, in the contention to replace Johnny Sexton, who's got a hamstring problem. Although Murray had the kicking duties at the weekend against Wales, O'Gara doesn't think he's an option at fly-half.
There's a fair amount of skill to get that position right. You know what I mean? With all due respect to Conor, he's an excellent 9, but I don't think he'd be an excellent 10. Far from test level, but that's my opinion on it. But maybe I have too much belief in the other 10s in the country, but I think it's not an option. I think it wouldn't. I think if you're a test or an out half for one of the provinces, and you saw Conor Murray playing at out half for Ireland at the weekend, it would leave you bitterly disappointed.
Can I just tease this out for a second? It would leave you bitterly disappointed, but it would also be a sign that people don't have confidence in you. And what have you done to give us the confidence that you should be in that position? The fact that we're having this conversation, that should be the kick in the ass that they all need to go, hang on a second, they're talking about a scrum half.
Yeah.
Who's never played.
This is not France. We can't do what France do. We don't have the flair, we don't have the ingenuity. And for Billy Burns, for Ross Byrne, take it by the scruff of the neck. It's Twickenham, show your wares, and let's hope it's a good game for you.
The very fact that we're having that conversation is actually a significant indictment of all the 10s that we have playing in Ireland at the moment.
Yeah, it's not good, and obviously Joey's not fit. Davy Fitzgerald's set to stay on as manager, well he will, of the Wexford Senior Hurlers for another year, guiding the model county to the Leinster title last year, but defeat by his native Clare last weekend after a loss in the province to Galway. But he's going to stay on for a 5th year in charge, and obviously more time now to think about 2021. The newly crowned Masters champion Dustin Johnson has thanked his brother for his help in guiding him to the green jacket. Austin Johnson was Dustin's caddy as the American won the final major of the year by 5 shots at Augusta on Sunday.
The tears were coming on 18 green. I jabbed my brother too. I told him to stop because he's gonna make me start bawling right there. But yeah, AJ's my brother. He's my best friend. I don't know if I'd be as successful as I am right now without him.
Was he always the caddy, or is this a new thing?
He's been caddy for a while. And Phil Mickelson's got his brother on the bag as well. So sometimes family and business can work. The Northern Ireland Open's been held in Milton Keynes in snooker. 2 century breaks helping Ken Doherty to a 4-1 win over Chris Wakelin. And this afternoon, Fergal O'Brien taking on Ashley Hugel. Mark Allen playing Anthony Hamilton. And if you like jumps racing, well, you can tune into Limerick later on, 12:25 start for the card there, Ger.
All right, John, I want to play you this. Shane McGrath last night talking about why Tony Kelly is unmarkable. We may as well luxuriate in literally one of the greatest Irish sports performances that has ever happened under the conditions. Have a listen.
If you're Liam Callan, the management team and the other team, Joe, I suppose you're thinking, how do you stop him? Do you man mark him? I think it's a waste of time trying to man mark him this year, because he could be down as 8 or 9. He could end up starting corner forward. Before you know it, he's back in his own 45. And as a man marker, there's very few guys can pick him up at corner as a corner back and pick him up equally as good playing at in the half forward line at the other end. So I think you just have to just have to trust the guys that if he comes into your zone, you try and mark him. But the form he's in, he's just unmarkable at the moment. He really is just a step above everyone. I think that's a lot of it down is the confidence he's hurling with. I think also he hurls really, really well for his club around this time of the year. If Ballyhay get on well in Clare and they progress to a Munster Championship club, Tony Kelly hurls really, really well at this time of year. He seems to like this time of year, likes the pitches, doesn't seem to bother him. He just glides along them. So, that's a factor too. He's used to playing championship games at this time of year too, Joe.
It's a good one. I'm trying to think of those kind of computer game performances we've seen from players down through the years in all sport. In hurling, Joe Canning had one against Cork for Galway a few years ago. DJ Kerry, 97, in the quarterfinal for Kilkenny against Galway. Was it Frank McGuigan for Tyrone against the Dubs in the 80s?
For my time.
But I'm trying to think of these when the ball is like a magnet or the sliotar is like a magnet for any sports, when it's just completely, you're running the whole show, running the game.
The 97 All-Ireland final of Morris Fitz. I don't know, I've never watched that back.
Yeah.
That's
the Morris Fitzgerald final, they called it that.
Right.
With 9 points from out of 13.
That's not bad.
I'm trying to think. I think Maradona in that. But
that's the level. I think it's the weather, like being so crap.
Yeah.
Like the West Coast, it was actually quite nice at various portions of last weekend here, and then you turn on the TV and the floodlights would be glimmering because the rain and the wind was howling, and it was like proper Atlantic coast weather. And here he is, whipping it over off both sides, from both corner flags essentially, and that was like just a fraction of what he was doing.
That's what they call zone in sport. Shane Lowry, member at the third round of the Port Rush, just got into the zone. And I asked him, what can you tell us what the zone is, and can you just seize the zone? And he says, no, if I could do that, I could do it every single week. Sometimes sports stars get into a zone. Remember that game, was it the Kerry-Galway game in the rain a few years ago in the football, and it was Michael Meehan was absolutely sensational, and I think Kerry won the game. Owen will correct us on that. But
oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it was just, sometimes the ball is like a magnet, and there's nothing, like you can actually, without even looking at the post, it's over. I'm trying to think of good examples, and I'll probably get better ones the next time we speak.
I think, John, like I know it's an easy comparison to reach for, but I think it is really like Messi in 2011, 2012, where you're looking at a stat line that is absurd, and like you can not watch a single minute of Lionel Messi that season and appreciate how incredible it is. You can not watch a minute of Tony Kelly this year and appreciate how amazing he's been with the amount he scored. But then you get to the eye test, then you get into seeing the types of scores that he's getting, and you see him dancing around four men before he creates the opportunity for himself to put the ball between the posts. You see him doing these sort of things, not just last weekend in the rain when they had a pretty good day team-wise, but another day in the rain against Limerick when they got hammered really, and they were by far the inferior team on the day. To put up those sort of numbers against a team like Limerick, given the troubles that Clare have had and given the lack of help that he's got in the forward unit for Clare at the moment, is just remarkable. He's on course for one of the best individual seasons in hurling's history if Clare get through another couple of rounds. The problem is he won't get hurler of the year if they lose this weekend. But if they win this weekend, I think
should he not get hurler of the year?
I think he will. I actually think he will. I think that the season is so telescoped. Like, you know, the level of performance that somebody else has to achieve in the next 4 weeks, which is probably 3 games or 2 games for some players, is so high to overcome what Kelly's already done. I think, actually, I would make him favourite at the moment. He wasn't yesterday. Maybe there's been a slew of bets on him in the meantime, but I would actually make him favourite at this point. For, like, the players vote for this, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. They know. They know that what he's doing is like, I can't do that.
Well, we would never have seen, if Clare exited the quarter-final stage, which they might have Waterford at the weekend, you'd never have seen a player of the year that has not really progressed in the championship before to a level where they're usually at the final, or normally it's the county that wins has and we had Austin Gleeson winning there a couple of years ago when Waterford didn't win the All-Ireland, but that's a lot of it's to split votes. But it's very hard to, like, is Tony Kelly the best hurler in the country right now? He is. So therefore, he should win the award.
I think so. Yeah,
no,
I think.
Well, no, it's not. It's not though. That's not how you judge the award. The award is who's playing the best season, and if like Tony Kelly's having the best season now, so right now he's hurler of the year, and at the end of the season he will still be the best hurler of the year. But is he the player of the season? And like, is he going to be the person who wins an All Ireland? Like, I think that counts for a lot. Is he going to be somebody who even plays in a semi-final? Maybe not. I think you have to play in a semi-final to be in the conversation for hurler of the year, because it is based on the season that you've had as a team and where you're going to get to it in terms of actually going all the way to winning Liam McCarthy. And I think one more game. I think he needs to win one more game and then he'll win it. I think if they lose at the weekend, he's not going to be considered. It's that much of a tightrope. And Jerry, you said the season's telescoped, but the season was like this before the round robins came in for hurling as well, and it still would have been absurd to see somebody lose at the quarter-final stage and win hurler of the year. I'm just being realistic here. I can't see it happening unless they win this weekend.
I think the period of time is actually what's important when it comes to making the votes. Everybody's got to remember Tony Kelly. he's been the entire story of the championship so far, with a little bit of Richie Hogan's flick and Limerick's collective juggernaut. Aaron Gillette is playing great. Cian Lynch played unusually well in a new position. The whole half-forward line have been sensational. Their halfbacks have been great. Like, that's a shared award. They all take votes off each other. Unless, obviously, somebody comes and scores 2-10 in the semi-final and is then man of the match in the final, and you're like, OK, fair enough, Aaron Gillette, fair enough, Cian Lynch, fair enough, whoever it is.
Joe.
Whoever. Yeah, whoever does it from this point forward and wrestles on All-Ireland, that's fair enough. But actually, if you gave Tony Kelly the All-Star even after, or the Hurler of the Year even after that, I'd be like, yeah, OK, that's fair enough. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous what we're seeing. Give him the award.
Well, you said it there subconsciously, Owen, if Tony Kelly wins another game. I mean, on his own. There's only another 14 other players.
Yeah. No, like, I mean, that's it, Sean, though, really, isn't it? Like, it's that was essentially, you had to pay a fiver for the game of the weekend. I paid it at half-time, I'm not going to lie. I paid a fiver for one half of hurling because I wanted to see Tony Kelly. That's how good the performance was. And it was worth it to even see. I actually went at half-time and rewinded the last 12 minutes of the first half to actually catch what was happening. Like, that's how good this guy is. He is making money for the GAA. Tony Kelly is making money for the GAA. That's how good this guy is.
Right, John, very quickly, the Masters.
Well, Dustin Johnson, well-deserved. Record 20 under par total. 265s in that, both bogey-free. He's an exceptional player. He's world number one. He's been in brilliant form. He's won a US Open at Oakmont. He's had a couple of majors he's thrown away. Chambers Bay in 2015. He kind of threw away with a shot of a waste booker, the 2010 PGA. His rate of improvement at the Masters, I didn't think he'd imagination for it, but he didn't really need to. It was such a soft course. You didn't really have the April Augusta that we've normally seen, and nobody really put it up to him. I think he thrashed Ram and Cantlay on Saturday. He took them out of the equation, and even there was a little bit of a wobble on Sunday early doors, but he put that to bed pretty quickly. And he didn't have Tiger stalking him, for example. He had Cameron Smith and Sung Jae Im, who did brilliantly, the pair of them, and they're two players to take out of this. Sung Jae Im, on his debut, 15 under par. This is the guy who lives in Holiday Inns. He doesn't stop playing golf all year round, Sung Jae Im. Maybe there's a lesson in that. The more you play, actually, sometimes the better you can get. His iron play was great. Scotty Scheffler was another player I took out of it, a debutant. And Rory, 10 shots worse than Dustin Johnson in the first round. Actually, a better Dustin Johnson score over the final 3 rounds. Once again, you have to ask the question, for Rory McIlroy, is it a mental thing? It is a psychological thing that when he is under pressure, there's an issue.
Yes.
And when he plays with freedom and he's under no pressure and he feels like nobody's watching and obviously there were no crowds there, then he can play with the freedom to shoot 66, 65. Yes. And that's why he hasn't won a major in what will be 7 years next year.
He's all setting up nicely for him for April, though. That's what we're all going to tell ourselves the week. It's all come around. He's learned. We'll talk ourselves into it. John, good stuff. Thanks very much for that.
Cheers.
It's 2 minutes past 9 here this morning. Loads of rugby this hour. Here's what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio today. It's Quinny's How's the Head with John Kerwin. Our OTB Gold is Wexford in 1956 with Ned Wheeler and Art Foley. Dadcast from 3 o'clock. Mount Rushmore is Derry. OTB Gold is Joe Malloy with Ruby Walsh. And then live tonight from 7, it is Joe and the lads bringing you the show from 7. Now, Up Close and Personal is a brand new series here from OTB AM and Gillette, where we pair a sporting duo together to see how well they know each other. Here's episode 2 with Kerry GAA stars Louise Galvin and Donnchadh Walsh.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The OTB Brief. Everything you need to know about sport every morning. Need to get on top of the day's sports news? Well, the OTB Brief is the only sports update you'll need every morning. With all the breaking stories, post-match reaction.
I always look about, teams who've won a league, their mindsets, their body language, their hunger, desire. And I see that so much in this Liverpool team.
And the best bits from off the ball, all in a 10-minute podcast.
Rory McIlroy's game has changed a lot.
The OTB Brief. Weekday mornings from 7:20 a.m. on OTB Sports Radio. Listen on the OTB Sports app.
Affected as COVID-19 continues to cause restrictions across.
Mom, is he still coming this year?
Of course he is.
Really, Dad?
He's coming.
Did you get the one he liked?
Of course I did.
These are his favourites. Is he definitely coming.
You just gotta believe.
Are you sure?
He's coming.
Grandad!
Happy Christmas, Conor.
I knew you'd come.
For live GAA score updates, stats and more as they happen, check out the new GAA Live Match Centre on the Boyle Sports app. Why not check out the hottest action on the biggest match of the week right now and make Boyle Sports #1 for GAA this championship season. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Need help? Contact gamblingcare.ie. 18+.
OTB AM. With Gillette, proud supporters of Movember. Gentlemen, let's move.
I'm Louise Galvin and I'm getting up close and personal today with my husband, Donnchadh Walsh. I would be very competitive, but I also think Donnchadh is extremely competitive, but he is someone who goes about his competitiveness in a much quieter way. And again, if he loses or comes second or whatever, he'll just kind of sulk, and you unless you're really keeping a close eye, you'd never know. So, you know, I always say people think he's very laid back, and I'm like, no, he's just very tolerant and patient. But inside, he's seething.
Yeah, I don't mind. I'm grand. Well,
I'm not a
maybe I am. Yeah, maybe I am. You're used to being probably. No, maybe maybe I am more competitive than you actually. Yeah.
No, you're not.
Would we compete and stuff? I suppose. Like we obviously we run and we gym and we train together at the moment now. We have been doing since lockdown this year, and we hadn't really done much of that before. We'd only gone for kick arounds and stuff like that. Exactly, yeah. At the time you did beat me in basketball, all right. I was gutted that day.
You fell as well and hurt your back, remember?
Yeah, that annoyed me. But other than that, then. I suppose Louise is able to hip thrust more than I am. So that was kind of annoying me there for a while. Now we don't have enough weights. We don't have 220 kg plus that Louise is able to hip thrust. 210 was it? But I had to get to 220. So I'd probably destroy my back in actually trying to do that, just so that I do have a PB better than yours.
So let's say you have a preteen or early teenager with a lot of potential. How are you going to mold him or her into someone, you know, an intercounty player, a star? Like, do you feel size, agility, skill, speed, power, luck, attitude? What are the main components that any child superstar needs to become an intercounty All-Ireland winning All-Star?
It's all attitude. Like it's completely attitude. Like if they have a good attitude, if a kid has a good attitude, well-rounded, like as well, just has to be able to take winning and losing in the same breath and be able to kind of learn from both. You know, you should learn from a win as much as you learn from a loss. So it's like you're obviously good at the, you know, like you're coming from the rugby, football and basketball backgrounds, and you can see more easily, oh yeah, that skill is useful in this position and it could be transferred to this sport and in that. And like I wouldn't have been able to identify those types of things because I didn't play many sports. I played a bit of rugby, played a bit of football, but it's only now, I suppose, that since meeting you, basically, that you've kind of opened my eyes to all of those types of things. All that I thought that I had when I was younger was just a good attitude to it. Like, you know, that I lost loads, like Cremon, playing with Cremon, we never won huge amounts, but I don't know where I just had a bit of a good attitude and a good work ethic again my parents, I suppose. They just get up and get on with it. Like, you know, my father was obsessed with it. My mother couldn't care less. And I landed somewhere in the middle, you know, where I wanted it to win enough, but I knew that it wasn't that important if I lost either. So
don't get too carried away with the highs and don't get too full on with the lows.
Absolutely. And even like as we're saying at the moment, like GA and our intercounty footballers need to be obsessed with it, but you need to not be obsessed with it as well. Some of the times when you can be, like, so having your whatever it is, your escapism, like your
yeah, like, as Donnchadh, when we were first seeing each other, like, I watched more GA than you, absolutely, and I used to be like chatting about the game, or, you know, the weekend we watched the Sunday game, and actually thought, because it was such a huge part of your life, you actually kind of would pull away from it, and, you know, weren't as upset. You'd actually watch a lot more now since you retired, I think, than you did when you played.
Yeah, like, in fairness, we never had the Kerry Golden years at home, like, you know, it was and
whereas I regurgitated it every
absolutely week. Like, yeah. And so again, I sometimes I look back and say, geez, did that help me, or did that hinder me, that I wasn't as obsessed? But overall, it probably helped me to know that I was able to take disappointments and kind of like just get away. And like, again, like club like Cremon formed in 83, 84. You walk into Cremon down to Jack's there, like if you'd a Johnny Mahoney medal, which is the local rowing, coastal rowing medal, that'd be worth a lot more than an All-Ireland football medal, really. So like, it was, even in Cremon, it was more about fishing really, and about oarsmen. So like, it wasn't
which is strange in Kerry, really, that football wasn't the number one priority even in the community.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's grown up there. Obviously, when Sean Sullivan like was making Kerry teams, it grew obviously, and it's been growing since. Now the Roars are trying to get back in again. Now at the moment they're trying to get a bit of success going again, but it's traditionally it's tradition, you know, and it'll take a generation or two for football to be held as high as rowing is in Jackstown and Cremon.
Do we have much laundry there to be doing, actually?
There's plenty there now, mostly yours stuff. It's all, I have it all hung up and dried. And how's the dinner coming along? How's the dinner coming along?
Oh, swimmingly, yeah. And we'll have a drop of tea and a bit of crumble maybe afterwards if you're good. Donnchadh, it is kind of funny how we talk about, you know, how time consuming it is being an intercounty footballer and have a career, but in fairness, we managed to maintain a relationship with me playing sport full time and travelling the world, living in Dublin, you living in Kerry, being an intercounty footballer, and time being so precious. So maybe actually being in separate rooms for this suits well, because we're used to probably being apart at the whole foundation of our relationship anyway. What do you think?
Yeah, like when I think when we first met, I don't know, obviously we met first time in Dublin, and you, I don't know, you dropped into conversation anyway. You said, geez, I'm desperate for going to the cinema, and I took it that geez, she must go to the cinema a lot, and I was like, geez, that's a bit unusual, like, she's a busy woman, but obviously you meant desperate as in like you never go to the cinema, so bringing you to the cinema for the first date wasn't a good idea.
Are you serious? I thought you were like this fella. I don't know, is he trying to be very funny or he's very slow?
But at least I had the backup plan that there was a coffee shop in the cinema anyway, so we could just sit there and watch people go to the cinema as opposed to
and come out again.
We still went to the cinema, it's just we didn't see anything in the cinema.
Yeah. Actually, Donnchadh, you remember as well when you first called over to pick me up and I asked you to come into the house because I said I needed a favour. Now the favour involved...
Yeah, it's a good story. It's a good one, actually.
This is a good story. Yeah, I tell the son well. So I said to Donnchadh, like, I'm really sorry, but can you come into the house because I need you. Well, I didn't tell him why. I said I need a favour. So he did, and I just need him to take a photo of me because I needed to send it off to a newspaper, and none of my housemates who were my teammates at the time were there. And my neighbours either side of me were 80 years plus, and I thought, you know, I wasn't sure what kind of photo I'd get out of them. So that's fine, but as the kind of months went by and we probably got a bit stronger, Donnchadh admitted, he fessed up that he thought I was asking him to come in to sign some autographs. Now, I don't know where this ego came out of, but I was living with three girls from the Irish Rugby 7 squad who, one was from the north who didn't know a GA, if it hit her across the head, a GA ball or football, and one was a Dub and one was a Cork woman. So none of them wanted his autograph.
In my defence, the way she had just been describing her three very mature friends, it sounded like they were like three 16-year-old girls, just her little fan club living up there in Dublin.
No, you thought they were your little fan club.
Well, yeah. If they thought you were good, I thought they were going to be weak at the knees when they saw me coming in the door. So yeah, that was a bit embarrassing, especially when, as you said, those girls, they wouldn't even know the gooch if you walked in there at the time. Never mind Donnchadh Walsh. Yeah. But
I said to one of them, the girl from up north, Ashley Baxter is her name. She came down one morning, so we were teaching all about GA, and I said, Bax, did you hear the gooch retired? And she said, aye, he did. I hear Cooper did too. And I was like, listen, forget it.
Again, it just, I suppose, it just, whenever you were doing your thing with rugby and whenever I was doing my thing, it just made sense like that you had to whatever, do analysts kind of watch a game that you weren't even playing in, you know, or that you had to do a gym session or had to eat at a certain time or you had to drink a certain amount of water or whatever it was. And it just, yeah, I suppose we understood each other on that level, like, you know, and as well we were at stages in our careers where there was maybe extra asked of us, like, you know, that we weren't just new kids on the block trying to make it. We'd made it and we were trying to establish ourselves and not only think about the on-field stuff, but you were being, you know, you were part of, you know, the kind of leadership group in with Ireland at the time, and there was those types of kind of extra things. You weren't just we were both thinking of wider kind of sports things rather than just the actual games of rugby and football, and it was great to be able to talk about your experiences of what you were experiencing, and a lot of the time you were just voicing your own thoughts and you were kind of making your own mind up, and I was just there, somebody listening, but I was also using what you were saying and trying to put it into my practice as well in the Kerry scene. So it was it worked out well there for those first few years, but now that we have neither
now they're both retired, yeah. We're stuck doing webinars at 9:00 on a Friday night.
Yeah, or like you're doing the dinner there, I'm doing the laundry up here, yeah. Like, so I don't know.
No, but I do remember it was interesting to be so close to someone that you could ask them, okay, you know, the way nerves get so bad. And I remember saying to you one day just before tournament, like I was off somewhere the other side of the world, like, why do we do this to ourselves? Like, I feel awful, I wish I was at home, you know, why do we?
Yeah.
And kind of like, do you feel this way too just before match? And you're like, oh yeah, absolutely, hate every minute of it till it's over. And we can have this conversation about like, is this right? Or, you know, are we enjoying our career? And yet when I look back, I would say, well, I did. And I always think you did too. But God, for those few hours of the night before a big tournament or a big game, or looking back on maybe poor performances, it's like, why do we do this to ourselves? Like, we could just be normal members of society that don't put ourselves out in this out in the public domain for kind of ridicule for not catching the ball or knocking on or missing a tackle or whatever.
Yeah, it was nice to kind of be able to chat to someone about those things, because you feel, as you said, you were reluctant to almost ask the question, like, is it normal to hate this feeling? But it was nice then to hear that, yeah, this is normal, like that this is completely okay. And our kind of, even though you could have played in tournaments, like, and again, that there would be nobody there, or there could be 60,000 screaming fans. Like, we had those, and like, you can go out into a rugby field and you can literally get smashed, and then have to run 100 meters chasing back someone, like, and get smashed again. Like, the things you were putting your body into, I would have never had to do that. I would never have to smash a fella in the face and get up or get smashed. And like, you were putting not only your, I suppose, your nerves on the line, but your body a lot more on the line than I ever had to do, because of the different sports. And I always kind of said, Jesus, would I have been able to do that? Like, okay, we consider ourselves a physical and full contact game in Gaelic football, but rugby sevens is on a different level. What altogether, playing in a full size pitch, only 7 of you versus 7 of them, and the open space.
Were you ever worried about me?
Just coming up to the wedding, all right, yeah. Just that last tournament before the wedding. But other than that, no, you were grand. Well able to look after yourself.
Fight my own corner.
Yeah, great stuff there. Up close and personal. That was the married Kerry sporting duo, Louise Galvin and Donnchadh Walsh, on the latest episode of Up Close and Personal. Stay tuned for episode 3. You can also watch back episode 1 with friends and former Liverpool and Ireland players Jason McAteer and Mark Lawrence. And plenty of rugby coming up now for the rest of the hour here on OTB AM. We've got Ron O'Gara coming your way in just a little while. But in the meantime, Neil Treacy, good morning to you. You're tight 5 for us here. How are you?
How are you doing, Ger?
Yeah, good. The Irish scrum against Wales, it's been an interesting restart, essentially, since we came back for Andrew Porter. Obviously, this is not the position that he thought he was going to be in 4 or 5 seasons ago, but right now he is our lone functioning test quality tight head, and he did really well last weekend.
He did do really well last weekend, and he's been doing really, really well for quite a while now. I think the fact that Tadhg Furlong is so good, it probably made us kind of didn't really fully grasp how good Andrew Porter has been as well for the last couple of years. The scrum is, the Irish scrum has been rock solid, I would say, for probably the last 5-6 years. It's been the one kind of area of the game that really they have not had many issues in whatsoever. And part of it is because the solid, the tight head props that have had the likes of Mike Ross was steady as a rock, and then Tadhg Furlong coming in, and you've like a stream of loose heads like Cian Healy, Jack McGrath and Dave Kilcoyne over the last 2 years then as well. But the other night, we saw that it was really, really good. They won a number of penalties against Wales, and most of it was coming from the Andrew Porter and Quinn Roux side of the scrum. So like the amount of kind of oomph that Quinn Roux was putting right through the back of Andrew Porter as well. Like the two of them, they are two enormous units, and there were a couple of penalties even when Rhys Carr, the Wales loosehead prop, he was like he had collapsed before the ball was even in. He was having that much problems actually just holding himself together before Porter and Roux were even actually properly driving, that he was chalking up penalties. But the scrum is going to be huge again this week. I just thought Andrew Porter deserved a mention as well, because he has had the burden of starting pretty much every important game since we came back from lockdown. And I just think it's incredible. I was thinking the last couple of days, Tadhg Furlong hasn't played a game of rugby since February. And I don't know, Ger, if you can think back, how many times since August when rugby came back on the show do you think you have actually directly spoken about the fact that, well, Tadhg Furlong is missing at the moment? That's a massive blow.
I think
how many times?
After the Saracens game. Like the Saracens obviously destroyed Leinster in the scrum, and Furlong's absence was noticeable in that one, I'd say. But other than that, maybe twice. Other than that,
yeah. And I just think that's incredible that for a player of that quality, that we haven't spoken about his absence pretty much at all. It just shows the quality, I think, of Andrew Porter.
Neil, could I just ask one point on Quinn Roux, because the tight head lock was a thing that came up quite a bit before the World Cup when Devin Toner was left out of the squad and Jean Klein was picked instead. Do we need to give him, I know you mentioned him there already, but do we need to give this position, I guess, a little bit more credit and a little bit more scrutiny when things go wrong on that side of the scrum?
Possibly, yeah. Like, I think it's one of those things where it's very difficult for us to look on the outside and see the impact that a tight head second row can have. I think it's very much down to what the players themselves will be talking about and the feeling they have. I do think, like, even though Ian Henderson is back this weekend, we'll probably get to it in another couple of points, but like, I would absolutely give Quinn Roux another start, because I think he fully deserved it the other night, for what we spoke about there in the scrum. And I also think just in general play, it was probably one of, if not his best performance in an Ireland shirt. And I think we're at a stage, particularly with these autumn internationals, where if someone comes in and actually does have a good game like that, you should be rewarding them with another shirt.
Look, that definitely makes a lot of sense, or at least, you know, putting them right in the mix for it and saying we've taken account of that and there is proper competition here, as opposed to shooing somebody straight back in. Having said that, Henderson was one of those players who was going to be a centre point for all Irish coaching and selectors from the moment that he got in the team. He hasn't quite been that. He hasn't quite been undroppable for Ireland.
Ian Henderson?
Yeah.
No, he hasn't been. And look, he's gone through phases as well where he's picked up kind of injuries, and he's had a few serious ones as well. But I think because James Ryan burst onto the scene in 2017, all of a sudden James Ryan became the undroppable second row. He became the guaranteed guy who was going to be playing in there. And then you were looking at the options to go alongside him, whether it was Ian Henderson, whether it was Tadhg Byrne a season or so later when he returned to Ireland. Guys like Quinn Roux, Jean Klein have also been knocking around there as well. And even Devin Toner was lasting right up until the Six Nations this year when he made his way back into the team. So there was always kind of like, I think we kind of had that in mind for Ian Henderson, probably had him down as a future Ireland captain, but I think it was the fact that James Ryan came through and just probably stole the limelight from him was probably what happened there. OK, one quick text here. England's pack, particularly the front row, will destroy Ireland's scrum. The difference Matt Proudfoot, the ex-South African scrum coach, has made to England forwards will be the difference in this match. Niche tweet, but are you concerned that perhaps this is where so this is another step up for Andrew Porter in particular, and so far this has been the level where the difference between him and the incumbent has been noticeable over the last 6 months in particular. So what do you expect? Can Porter hold his own this weekend? Are we grand there now? Yeah, I absolutely think so. Like, I think you could probably pick on one hand the amount of games that the Irish scrum have come out second best in the last, I'd say, 5-6 years, easily. If anything, Ireland's scrum has been better than England over the last 5-6 years. He's going to be coming up. We don't know the teams yet. If we assume Andrew Porter is starting, he's probably coming up against one of Maka Vunipola or Ellis Genge. He's played against Maka Vunipola plenty of times already. Maybe played against Ellis Genge off the bench a couple of times as well. Like, I think where England have a power advantage over Ireland, it's around the field. It hasn't been in the scrum from what I can remember over the last few years. I think that, I don't think Ireland are going to destroy the English scrum. I don't think England are going to destroy Ireland. I think the scrum itself is probably actually going to be on an even enough keel throughout the game. Okay, let's talk about the second one, or the tight five this morning. Defending at set pieces. Are we good? Are we bad? Where are we at the moment? It's not so much where we are. It's actually how good England are at attacking off set pieces at the moment. And just the game against Georgia that I watched it back yesterday evening, and the first thing that jumped out: 6 English tries. All 6 of them came within 2-3 phases of a set piece. So for 3 of them, Jamie George walked over off the back of a line-out maul. For 2 of them, it was first phase or within a couple of phases off a scrum, and then kind of short little pick and carries off the back of a dominant scrum. And then the middle one would have been towards the end of the first half when England scored. And that was first phase off a scrum, kind of about 40 yards out, and just running one of those beautiful kind of power plays and going over in the corner and, you know, tearing the Georgian backline apart. So they clearly use their set pieces as a form of attacking. They're not necessarily using their scrum as, you know, the opportunity to just walk over other teams and milk penalties and milk 3 points as much as possible. Ireland do this as well a lot, where the function of their scrum is actually to get the ball in and out in a nice, timely fashion and use it as an opportunity, as a platform to attack, rather than just trying to walk all over each other. But particularly the maul defence, that is going to be huge, because England, like, they just literally just walked themselves over for 3 tries in that opening 15 minutes. So for when you're talking about the lineouts and the 22, stopping England setting up a maul, going back to maybe some of the things we spoke about France doing against Ireland last week, where they're targeting their pods to kind of try push England back towards the touchline anytime they're trying to set up a maul, or cut that off right at the start and make sure you have someone sacking a player as soon as they hit the ground after the line out, maybe not contesting lineouts as much, because that's where you overcommit bodies, and that's when you start to, you know, if you overcommit the bodies at the line out to try and steal a ball and you don't steal it, that's where you end up in a situation where England can set up a maul quite quickly against 1 or 2 players, and then they get the momentum early on. And once you get a bit of momentum early on at a maul, that's when you're creating a lot of trouble.
So what do we do?
What do we do is, I think on those ones, you try sack them as quick as possible. Probably don't challenge in your own 22 as much. And then for first phase attacks, you know, when England take the ball off the top of the line out, it's pretty much pushing up as fast as you can, putting as much pressure on them. Things that England have been doing to Ireland over the last few years, and getting into their face straight away and not allowing them the opportunity of getting the ball across the hands.
That's line speed, essentially. That's what,
yes.
when the definition, when they're after, when we beat England at the weekend, they'll talk about the great line speed, or if they hammer us, they'll be like, oh, our line speed wasn't very good.
When they pass the ball, run fast.
Dealing with England's power is next.
Yeah, and I suppose the one thing that we can be all grateful of is that, well, hopefully he gets back to full fitness at some point in the next few months, but Manu Tuilagi isn't around this weekend. So that is the first victory Ireland have had, because when Ireland beat England, Manu Tuilagi is not around, which we've seen over the last 10 years or so. So that's the first thing anyway. It's also probably why I mentioned Quinn Roux, why I'd be interested to see him stay in for this weekend, because he does bring an enormous amount of power. And I can certainly recall over the last few months being on this show a handful of times, and the issue of England absolutely battering Ireland with their sheer power has been brought up almost every single one of those, because it was a major issue in the game against England at Twickenham in February. It has been an issue in pretty much all of the Ireland-England games over the last 2 years, ever since Ireland would have won the Grand Slam at Twickenham. Manu Tuilagi was a big part of that as well, but obviously he's gone, so that's something we don't have to worry about. But like, they did bring in Ollie Lawrence from Worcester into the centre in his place. He looked quite good the other day against Georgia. He is another very, very powerful runner. Like, they continued with Jonathan Joseph on the wing like they did against Ireland. Like, their backline is full of big, powerful players. Billy Vunipola, Jack Willis, and Maro Itoje are in the back row now. Jack Willis, Player of the Year in the Gallagher Premiership, and like, he is a brute force flanker. So just because Manu Tuilagi isn't there, it doesn't necessarily mean Ireland are going to win. It just means when Ireland win, Manu Tuilagi isn't there, but they still have an enormous amount of power to deal with. And I think this is a really important game for Ireland, not just in terms of results or anything, but actually really, really trying to prove to themselves that they can put it up physically to England.
What about England's kicking threat?
Well, the kicking threat is something that they've killed us with as well, because they kind of start off butchering us with the power and bludgeoning us with the power, and then all of a sudden, like, Ireland we're committing players into tackles. We're doing everything we can to try and, you know, just make these one-off tackles, and that's when the space comes in at the back. And we saw it at Twickenham this year with those 2 kicks in behind where, you know, bouncing balls lead to mistakes, and that's where England scored 2 tries. We saw it at the Aviva Stadium last year as well, at the start of the 2019 Six Nations, when you have, and what we expect will be the dual threats this weekend of Owen Farrell at out half and Henry Slade at first centre, or potentially as well playing someone else at out half, having the likes of Farrell and Henry Slade in the centre because they're so comfortable at kicking the ball. And then you've Elliot Daly at full-back as well. So the kicking threat comes from everywhere. They mix it up as well. They put high balls into the corners. They put grubbers in behind. They chip over the top. And it's where they've absolutely killed Ireland in a few games over the last couple of years, just with the versatility of their kicking game.
And then in terms of us, the out-half choices that we have to face, pretty stark.
It is. The fact that he did media duty yesterday would probably led me to think that Billy Burns is probably going to be okay. He'll come through the HIA protocols, and I'd expect he'll probably start this weekend. I do hope that Ross Byrne gets some proper minutes. I want to see him get 30 plus minutes this weekend, because I think he needs it. He played that game. He had that start at Twickenham before the World Cup when things went wrong, and ultimately it was the game that cost him his place at the tournament. And I think people have just held that game against him for a little bit too long. Like, it's a World Cup warm-up game when all other 22 players pretty much on the pitch that day disappointed, and yet he was the one that has probably carried the brunt of the blame and is still being spoken about. It's something that people are still holding against him a year and a bit further down the line, when he's played regularly for Leinster. He's done it regularly for Leinster. He's filled in constantly for Leinster in big games as well, and he has played well in those big games. He's 25, he's going to be 26 in April. I think it's about time he actually started getting some significant minutes, and I think a bit of trust needs to be put in him, because all we've seen of him in an Ireland shirt over the last few years is playing out the last 10 minutes of games when Ireland have either comfortably had it won or have been comfortably beaten.
Okay, so you're a Ross Byrne believer, and you think now's his time?
Yeah, ideally, I would actually like to start him this weekend. I expect that Billy Burns will start, though, but I do want to see Ross Byrne getting some proper minutes, at least one start over the next two games, and I want to see him getting some significant minutes in those as well.
All right. Neil, good stuff. That's this week's Top 5. Thanks very much for that. Enjoy the game. We didn't get a prediction. It's a little bit early in the week for that. We want to see the teams before we actually get to that point of it. OTB AM live, weekday mornings from 7:30 with thanks to Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Stay with us. Right now in OTB, we've got Ronan O'Gara in fine form from Monday Night Rugby. Enjoy.
Did you watch Ireland-Wales on Friday?
Yeah, I did. It was a good game. Yeah, a really good game. I thought... Ireland didn't let Wales exist. They suffocated them. They owned the game, and I thought up front they were impressive. And Gibson Park looked fresh. He looked sharp. James Lowe obviously looked good for the 80 minutes. But I think it was astounding, really, that as good as he is, that Wales concede a try like that in the 80th minute. It would never. I've never ever seen that before off of just a scrum and a one play pass, and he's obviously a powerful winger, but from what you'd expect of Wales, that never would happen on their watch before.
A lot's happening on their watch at the moment. They're in a bad place.
Yeah, they are, but obviously they have Georgia coming up, so that's a huge game for them. And it can change the momentum, and the coaching team will be crying out for that. So it's an opportunity to get, I suppose, a starting point for that team. And but we're not here, I suppose, to talk about Wales. We're here to talk about Ireland. I thought Ireland were good, Joe. I was impressed. I thought there was a lot of performances from people, like Peter O'Mahony. Johnny looked sharp. A lot of players. I thought. Put in powerful performances, notably Caelan Doris looks an exceptional player.
He seems to have nailed down his spot, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of players, very good players. What they do, they seem to have an extra second or two with or without the ball. He looks very, very comfortable, and even around kick-off receptions, he's very, very comfortable. There's never any panic about, will he catch it or won't he catch it? You just assume that even though he's still at very initial stages of his international career, he looks very, very comfortable in his role, and his skill set is really, really good.
James Lowe, just full of energy and catches the eye, and he said something afterwards which almost sounds too simplistic. but when you watch him play, I'd say other outside backs could pay heed to it. And he just said, as an outside back, I refuse to let the game pass me by. I'm just going to get involved. And I think it's great when you see him popping up on the opposite wing and popping up here and there and getting himself involved. Is there any downside to that? Can that mean you lose your shape in certain ways, or is that just a good thing for him to get involved?
No, it's a good thing, and that would come from environment. I would think that would be, obviously from his days in Super Rugby, that would be a massive, I suppose, focus for all outside backs in the Southern Hemisphere, but also then going into Leinster, and they're winning all around them, and they're probably competing with each other as opposed to other teams, and that's what I suppose sets them apart. That they're winning the game is one thing, but actually probably winning the internal battle and getting probably recognised by your peers in that team is something that those players crave and search. And he seems to be very much in the growth mindset, positivity framework, which suits him really well. He is vocal. He's spiky. He's a very, very good player, and his positivity shines through every time you see him.
Because I would suspect lots of wingers can think to themselves, well, I'm fulfilling my role and I'm sticking to the process and I'm on my wing and I'm doing the right thing, and games can pass them by. We've seen that with Irish wingers too much. Sometimes you just have to, get a feel for the game and insert yourself into it.
There's a skill in that too as well, Joe. I think in terms of picking your moment when to rove and when not to rove, there'd be nothing worse from probably Johnny's point of view because the way his brain works too, he'd be thinking 3 or 4 phases ahead if his winger isn't there when he really needs him to be there. So I think it's obviously when it becomes multi-phase, you have more the capacity to seek out opportunities on either side of the wing. But work rate is huge in the back three nowadays, and with the way defences are as well, they're a really, really key part of the jigsaw. And I think the massive, I suppose, positive for the Irish players was that I think we looked to have another 10-15 metres width in our defence line, which was really good to see, because Wales never looked like scoring a try.
And so at times Andy Farrell even himself said we look narrow in Paris from a defensive point of view. So what allows you to get more width in your defence?
Of course, because you win in collisions.
It still comes down to that.
Test rugby, if you win the first two, the opposition probably have to kick the ball. If you get on the front foot in the first 2 phases, you're going to keep playing with the ball, and it's really, really hard to get width in your game. If you can slow down the ruck, you can get your spacing right. If you can get your spacing right, you can get off the line. If you can get off the line, it gives confidence to people inside and particularly outside you to leave the line together. So so much of it comes down to tackle quality, but I suppose the preparation to get the tackle right.
So there always will be a brutal simplicity to rugby. Who's going to dominate that contact area? Ireland dominated, and Andy Farrell used that word, Wales, not least up front, but also in the tackle, and seem to kind of bully them physically in so much as you can. So Twickenham at the weekend. Doesn't seem like that's possible for Ireland to do that to England.
On the strict, probably on the strict specimen against specimen, no, but there's different ways to achieve gain line success. Footwork, vision, changing the point of attack, playing with the full 70 metres of width of a pitch, and there are most definitely areas of going after them and going after where the space is. And I think Ireland will have a very intelligent attack menu, I suppose, prepared for this weekend. And I think after last weekend, they'll be confident, and they will have, epitomised by James Lowe, they'll have a spurt in their step, and they'll go in there. Obviously, a lot of that could be repelled by the fact that Johnny isn't playing, because he gives them an awful lot of security and an awful lot of belief. But it has to be an opportunity for whoever is next. And, you were reading, I suppose, a few articles today, the thoughts of Conor Murray playing at 10. I don't think that's an option. And you'd like to see that it'll be either one of the Burns or it'll be Billy Burns from last weekend, who did well when he came in.
Yeah, and he seems to be going through the return to play protocols, and he'll be available for selection. Why would the Murray thing just not work? Why is it too much of an ask of him?
Because he's a number 9. He's played his whole career.
Well, look, I know he's a number 9. Everyone listening knows he's a number 9. But I mean, why? Like, what can... I feel like the French lads would be like, go on, you can do it. Like, it's just rugby, and they'd slot in. Why can't we be a bit more loose about that kind of stuff?
You can be loose, but like there's a fair amount of skill to get that position right. You know what I mean? With all due respect to Conor, he's an excellent 9, but I don't think he'd be an excellent 10. Far from test level, but that's my opinion on it. But maybe I have too much belief in the other 10s in the country, but I think it's not an option. I think it wouldn't... I think, you know, if you're a test or an out half for one of the provinces and you saw Conor Murray playing at out half for Ireland at the weekend, it would leave you bitterly disappointed.
Yeah. And when you talk about the skill that's required at 10, specifically,
it's a completely
what is that?
different skill set. You know what I mean? It's very, very different. There, for example, so it would be like, you know, if you put it that way, if you go back, it's like, you know what I mean? Is it, maybe it's not the same argument, but it's maybe like starting Johnny at 9. Like, that doesn't sound logical to me.
No, it doesn't sound logical, but it's just, well, I think even Andy Farrell said Murray at 10 is a viable option, you know, he said this is viable.
Well. Yeah, most definitely, I would think, in your 23, obviously, you have to make up 3 different backlines, depending on injuries. But you'd also, you know what I mean, you wouldn't be thinking he's in your first 2 10s. He most definitely is an option, and I think it was just because he played in the 10 jersey the last day coming off the bench. I think he had a little bit of a point proof. If that was in the 9 jersey, I think he would have done just as well.
Yeah, okay.
He's very comfortable with the ball. He's a great rugby player. But in terms of starting a test match at 10, I think, you know what I mean, Ireland has, well, for me, better options.
Okay, fair enough. Maybe the more pressing issue for Conor Murray is Jameson Gibson Park. So he did his chances no harm. Who starts in Twickenham for you?
That's a good question. I obviously have, I know Conor's game. I would say they'll start Gibson Park again and they launch Conor from the bench. I think it's about driving internal competition. I suppose template before the Wales game was the people in possession of the jerseys. If they go well, they have a great chance of starting in Twickenham. So a lot of them did very well. So you could easily roll out the same team, and I think it's only going to be good for Conor's long-term aspirations that you have someone like Gibson Park snapping on his heels. But now that he's done well, I'd say you'd roll with him again, and we all know what Conor can do. So he'll have a huge role to play. There's no doubt about it.
You alluded to some of the things Ireland will have to do to get around England's physicality at Twickenham. How else do you beat this English team? Because they do feel, not least at Twickenham, even if there are no fans there, they do feel pretty formidable right now for obvious reasons. So have you seen any chinks there or things that Ireland can target?
I'm sure I have. I haven't studied them in depth from a long time. I was in the ground in Japan when they beat New Zealand, and that was an amazing performance, I thought. They tore New Zealand apart, just, you know what I mean, with a brilliant kicking game, but also with the capacity to keep the ball in hand. And Ford was had a really, really, was probably his best game for me in an England jersey that night. They don't have many weaknesses, Joe. No, they're one of the best teams in the world. There's no doubt about it, especially considering South Africa aren't playing. Also, England and France are the 2 teams that are performing very, very well. So they don't have many weaknesses. They've, I suppose, an awful lot of trust and maturity in their team now, and there's a lot of, I suppose, combinations that are beginning to gel and excelling at test level. But you know, that's the beauty of sports. You look what happened with Argentina, New Zealand, at the weekend, and it blows every, I suppose, sporting template per performance out of the window when you haven't played for over 300 days as a team. But how polished did they look? And, you know, when the attitude is there and the game plan and the belief, and I suppose doing the simple things well over and over again, it shows you that anything is possible. So, of course, I think with the belief this Irish team have, and with the you'd like to think that it's a massive opportunity as opposed to a mission you're dreading.
See, I'm sort of dreading it. Twickenham has not been so kind of late, and it doesn't look like that gap is getting any closer. Like, so for instance, a specific, Maro Itoje. Like, Ireland have got to figure out what to do with Maro Itoje, as extraordinary as he is. What can you do with him? Come on, coach.
Question.
Come on, coach.
I think that's one side of it, Joe. But the other side of it too is, I think for Ireland, you'd like to think that they have enough to concentrate on for themselves. You can worry about Maro Itoje, but if you're always looking at the opposition, if you're always looking to maybe not copy, but do what he's doing, you'll always be a step behind. Ireland are with James Ryan and whoever his partner is in the second row, they'll be a good combo. I think what excites me in coaching is the fact that, irrespective of the opposition, the challenge to get 23 players firing and performing at 90% of their optimum is a huge challenge in itself. So that would be, I think, very pleasing for Andy Farren's coaching team to see, okay, let's concentrate on what we can do. And if we can do it well, I'm sure they'll pose questions, because everyone in the game has a weakness. It's about how you can, I suppose, consistently chip away at that to get some dividends.
So, look, England are favourites. What's an acceptable kind of day for Ireland, given previous events at Twickenham over the last couple of years and Dublin in 19? Well, it may not necessarily be a win. What would you say? Okay, that's acceptable.
Yeah,
for
you're right. That's a good question. I think a strong performance. I think the great thing about it is that people at home, or whoever loves watching the Irish rugby team, they'll be able to come up with their own opinion on it. So, I think it's expecting Ireland to beat England and Twickenham is a big ask, but it's not out of the realms of possibility. In these things, it's about winning the first 10 minutes and then kind of, I suppose, winning the body language battle and then implementing your, I suppose, footprint on it. What you don't want to do is you don't need to go a 14-0 down to England and then give them confidence, and then they probably get into that mode where they can run over teams because they can play a power game and they can play a pace game. Because I suppose of the profile of certain players, don't have as many power players as they have, but that doesn't mean that we necessarily aren't as big a threat either. Yeah,
and a final one, quite often a feature of these games has been Ireland in their own half, either taking too long to kick it or getting themselves into all sorts of bother. From a kicking game point of view, we've seen Sexton kick a bit more, we've seen fewer box kicks. What do you want to see in that department?
Yeah, that is good, because the danger is if you kick loosely to England, with Johnny May and with Daly, you could be under your post quite a bit. I think where England have, I find very interesting is the fact that the number and variety of kickers they have in their back line. They've stolen the jump on a lot of teams in terms of their attacking kick, but their attacking kicks are very good because they're a threat with the ball in hand, so they're multi-threats across the park. And I think if it's Farrell is a really, really astute player, and he's a physical player, but he's also a smart player. So once he gets on the front foot, as we've seen with Saracens in the Aviva, obviously he didn't play in that game, and that shows just how good or how important winning collisions are, getting front foot ball. But also you could see in the second, minutes 50 to 70, Leinster still had chances against Saracens that on another day they could have taken.
Okay, well, we'll talk next week. It's going to be a great marker to see where Farrell and this team is. That's at Twickenham at the weekend. You mentioned Argentina, so we got to touch on this. 402 days since their last test. Quite extraordinary. We had Michael Cheika in the coaches.
402?
Yeah, 402 days, no games. We had Mario Ledesma in tears. We had Cheika sitting there in the coaching box. For people who didn't see the game, we keep hearing you have to score loads of tries to beat New Zealand. Well, Argentina did it their own way. Sanchez and Mounga had early penalties. Then on 19 minutes with the advantage, a little Sanchez chip, and he got a try and got on the end of it. That was 10-3. Bowden Barrett scored a penalty, then another scrum penalty for Argentina goes 16-3, then 19-3, then the All Blacks got a try to go 19-10, but then penalty in 57 minutes, penalty in 75 minutes, and there was a consolation try for the All Blacks to make it 25-10. The closest Argentina had ever come before was 1985, when they drew with the All Blacks. They had one handling error in the entire 80 minutes after 402 days out. So that was something. What did you make of both teams?
Yeah, it was an unbelievable game of rugby. I think, as you said, it was. It was. I was on a bus actually going to Paris watching it, and what an atmosphere! Obviously, because there was a crowd was full. Well, as full as it is with, I suppose, COVID restrictions, but there was a great atmosphere. Argentina were so accurate. But I thought it was Matera's comments after the game were very revealing in the fact that they seem to figure themselves out in the fact that for many years I think they tried to copy potentially what New Zealand or South Africa or Australia were doing, but then they just said, we're different. We're South Americans, we do things very differently, and I think they really tapped into the emotional side, and it was such a powerful performance. But tellingly, he said that they were happy to defend against the All Blacks, which you've never heard any other team say, because normally if you give them the ball, New Zealand after phases, they rip you apart. But their attack wasn't sharp, and obviously around the breakdown and with the poaching new laws, Argentina profited very well from that. And as you said, it was a consolation try. There was never at any stage watching the game that I felt that New Zealand were going to win this game. That you could see that the energy and the flow was with Argentina, and they were absolutely fully deserving of their victory.
That is an interesting point about that you said afterwards, where they talked about doing things their own way. And you know, we're South American, we have our own rugby DNA. So for you, what is quintessential Argentinian rugby at its best?
Well, I think obviously in the game nowadays, you know that you have to be strong in a lot of areas: the scrum and the line out, the kicking game, and your defence, and your attack. But as you said, like one handling error in 80 minutes, and Argentina played, and they were dangerous with the ball, and they put New Zealand under pressure. I think New Zealand will be having a look at how they defend there. It comes back, I suppose, to points we've discussed on the show before, and the fact that they're soft in the outside challenge, and they let teams kind of run at them. But nowadays, when teams are so good around the ruck, it's very hard to get possession off them. And New Zealand were ill-disciplined, and they came up with a lot of penalties against them, which is uncharacteristic of them. But it seems to be very much a team in transition, and a little bit, I suppose, you know, gone is that stability where you'd associate, you know, with the teams of McCaw and Carter and Reid. But now that, I suppose, aura of invincibility is most definitely gone. Because
the new batch, correct me if I'm wrong, but you just presume they can't be as good as the previous group, or are they?
But they wouldn't think like that, I suppose, because they'd be, you know, I suppose when they get into New Zealand camp and spending time with the Crusaders, it's a very, very positive environment.
But what do you think outside of that environment? I know they have to think a certain way, but if you're looking at it in a cold way on the outside, I would just presume they can't be as good as the previous batch.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I just think that there was an exceptional batch led by Dan Carter, and I obviously be biased because I've spent time with him and I kind of understand his mindset. But an exceptional player. But Mo'unga is you know, I mean, putting a stamp on it, but at the same stage, he's still at the initial stages of, obviously, when you have someone like Bowden Barrett there, the number 10 jersey will never feel like it's his on his own, and sometimes in that position you need that guarantee that you're going to be running it for a game in, game out. But there's, I suppose, question marks in the back three, and there's question marks in the centres, and there's obviously the back rows and a lot of new players, second rows. It's, you know, I mean, they've a luxury of choices, but the front row too, there's opportunities for people. You know, so I think there's no doubt that this New Zealand team, under the new management, hasn't hit the ground yet, and with, I suppose, the enormity of pressure that comes with that job, they'll have to find their straps pretty soon.
Yes. Brilliant stuff as ever. Thanks so much. Much appreciated, Ronan. Thank you.
See you, Joe.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, proud supporters of Movember. Gentlemen, let's move.